Good morning, Pensar basketball fans. And this is probably the earliest we have ever done a live. It is just after 6 a.m. I don't know who is going to wake up for this, but analytics tell us that we have a lot of fans in Europe. So hopefully, a lot of you will be able to catch a live for once. And today we are going to be talking about the Toronto Raptors, what we saw in preseason. Am I over my grieving of Jeff Dowtin? Yes, actually, I am. And this is going to be a lot more upbeat than the last one. I do have some good news to share towards the end of this live about Jeff. That's good. And I just want to talk about really what I saw and really one missing piece. I want to grade every single player for the preseason. I'm going to talk about what I think the Raptors could actually do if even 80% of what I think could happen for the young players on this roster actually hits. And yes, we will talk about the missing piece, the glaring thing that is just jumping out to me and potentially what the Raptors may be able to offer. We'll also talk about the potentially scary slash sticky situation with Christian Coloco. There have been some mentions of a disabled player exception, and we can talk a little bit about, just so we are informed as a community, about what that entails and really what the CBA says about disabled player exceptions. There are a lot of examples to explore in recent NBA history, why it might not make sense to do it for someone like Christian. We'll talk about that. And we're also going to talk about how to talk about the game in a slightly deeper way. I did a bit of a deep dive into my own archives, into the Pensar basketball archives. I do this once in a while just to see if I'm progressing as a podcaster, as a content creator, if I'm getting worse, if I'm getting better, am I getting calmer, am I getting better on the mic? The video quality certainly went down. I'll hand you that. But I went back to last year and some of the stuff that I was talking about, and I think that this would be a really good time before the season starts to get very reflective about some of the things that we were talking about back then and maybe how they've panned out or haven't panned out. Anyways, I'm going to hit the intro. Make sure to hit like and subscribe. It definitely gets the video out to more Raptor fans like you. All right, let's get to it. All right. Okay. I mean, YouTube algorithm tells me that this is the absolute worst time, Sunday morning, to do a live. So I'm doing a live on Sunday morning to show the algorithm that I am boss and I can do lives whenever the hell I want. Okay, this is definitely not a good idea, but I had a lot to say and I've spent the night really thinking about a lot of things. And I think this is always a great time when these ideas are fresh and right on the tip of my tongue to talk about them. So let's take a look at the stats. And I know the stats don't mean a heck of a lot for preseason, but they kind of do. And they kind of don't. You just have to take it in context, right? So these are the Raptor stats through. Some of these comments are hilarious. I was thinking about going to bed. Pinsar comes on. Well, no sleep for me. All right. Thank you, Slanch. Appreciate it, man. So this is the box score. I am flashing the wrong number. Hang on, guys. I'm going to pull this up. Flop already flopped. Here we go. These are the Raptors stats for, nope, that's not it either. Give me 1 second. Sleepy brain. All right. Okay. And yes, if you are wondering, I have not slept yet, but I promise I'm gonna perk up and we're going to do this right. Okay, so these are the stats for the Raptors on the preseason. And again, take it with a grain of salt. They didn't have a full lineup for a lot of the games. There was a game against a team from Australia that was missing a lot of players. So I understand the competition was not great, and you can't really read too much into this. Scottie Barnes, I hate to break it to you, but Scottie is probably not going to average 32 points per 36 minutes for the regular season, but some trends have sort of emerged, right? There's some positive stuff, there's some negative stuff. And regardless of whether you want to say it's preseason, it's post, it's still basketball. At the end of the day, it's still basketball, right? Teams are gearing up. Most teams are not playing their top guys major minutes, so you're not entirely getting a look, but you are getting an idea of play style. So, in terms of just kind of grading these players out, I will do that after just taking a philosophical overview of how I feel about the Raptors after having, a day to sort of simmer down on my Jeff Dowtin sadness. I feel good about the Toronto Raptors. Mainly, I feel good defensively about the Toronto Raptors. Offensively, I have a lot of questions. And I think that those questions are probably not going to be answered for a few weeks. So, regardless of what happens in the first week of the season, there's going to be a lot of adjustments as something worth noting. When you implement a new system, when you implement a new coaching staff, new point guard, if Scottie takes a big step, these are all things that teams don't have necessarily a great scouting report on. Young players are really, really hard to scout against when they add a lot to their bag, right? Scottie is taking shots that he was passing up last year. He's scoring from different spots on the floor. I don't think defenses understand what's hit them yet. Give them a few weeks and see how they adjust. Once they adjust, he will have to adjust. Then you'll actually know if he's arrived at that point. I'm not saying don't get really excited because he certainly seems like a much better player. And if I flash you his stats from last season preseason to this season preseason, it's basically the difference between Michael Carter Williams and I don't know, John Morant, like Zion Williamson. I mean, it's basically all NBA versus like a bench guy. It didn't mean anything to me last season, so I'm not going to start hyping it up this season because it's preseason, whatever. But the eye test to me says he's moving differently. He's scoring from different places on the court. And even in the doldrum of last year's Scottie has regressed, Scottie is not progressing, etc., I was very much on record saying, I'm seeing all the growth. It's just not popping right now for whatever reason. The whatever reason, is gone. So now it's popping. To people who think that he just magically got better in one off season, I just want to throw this out there. And I don't think I've really addressed this yet, but it's become a bit of a talking point in my inner social circle. He could have done a lot of this last year too. He showed you spurts of this last year as well. You can say his conditioning is a little bit better. I think that's a little bit overblown. I think it's just the offense. I think it's his mindset. I think it's his approach. I think it's his role. I think it's the coach. I think it's a lot of things that are influencing this. But to those of us who were saying last year, if you give this guy similar usage to a Pascal Siakam, he could probably give you similar stats, albeit on slightly lower efficiency. I stand by that. I stood by it all year last year, and I'll die on that hill. We'll talk about what I think a lot of fans miss about basketball when we talk about basketball. I've had a lot of really, due to the Jeff situation, I've had a lot of deep conversations about basketball over the last 4 days, 3 days with some really smart people that are considerably further along in the world of basketball than I am. And it's opened my eyes to a lot of stuff, maybe stuff that I knew, maybe stuff that I didn't know, maybe stuff that I suspected to be true, but didn't really think about for a while. And it's really sort of, I don't want to say completely flipping my perspective on a lot of things, but it is giving me a little bit more assurance that, hey, like this thing that you thought might be true actually is true. This actually is how this works. So it was a very good 3 to 4 days. So to stick on script, first of all, I forgot to wish y'all happy coffee, man. Like I usually do these super late at night. And even though I'm sipping on coffee, I feel obnoxiously weird telling people to enjoy their coffee at 1 a.m., even though I'm enjoying my coffee at 1 a.m. But right now, it is a completely sane time to tell you to enjoy your coffee at 6 a.m. in the morning. Let's talk about the preseason grades and get this out of the way. I'm not really a big fan of grades or whatever, but let's do this. Okay. So, in terms of Pascal Siakam, right? What's sticking out to me really as a positive is I think he was reasonably efficient. He was the minutes leader for the Raptors, which should surprise absolutely no one. He's been the per minutes per game leader all year last year. I think he was the minutes per game leader all year the year before. It's just a guy who plays a lot. And for good reason. He's a good player. In terms of, what the positives are, well, he's attempting 3 threes a game, nearly 3 threes a game. And if you compare it to last year season average, this is a slight uptick, which is interesting. He's not hitting them though. I don't expect that trend to completely continue. I think this could be just a player who's a veteran, doesn't have a heck of a lot to prove in preseason. I think that the fact that he has been willing to take fewer shots, you can absolutely see that he is not leading the Raptors in field goal attempts, which is kind of crazy. But you know what else is perhaps even more crazy? He's not leading the Raptors in free throw attempts. Now, if I told you that Pascal Siakam would play the most minutes per game and not lead the team in scoring, not lead the team in rebounding, not lead the team in assists, not lead the team in steals, blocks. Literally, he leads the team in absolutely nothing. And I have nothing bad to say about his preseason other than I hope he hits a few more shots. I give Pascal Siakam a solid A minus for preseason. I think that his lower usage role, willing to play within the offense, willing to allow this newer team to gel, allowing Scottie and Dennis to get their on ball reps, sort of probing. He's a vet. He doesn't have anything to prove in preseason. His role is assured. He is an all-star. He is an all-NBA guy. If the Raptors are successful this year, it will probably largely be a byproduct of him being really good. And the Raptors are going to have a really good season if he and Scottie both play well. I think it's encouraging that he's taking the shots that he should be taking more often than he was last year. I think that it's encouraging that he's holding the ball a lot less. I think that it's encouraging that he's willing to give this a shot. We were not sure initially how he felt because I got a lot of Fred VanVleet vibes from him at the opening day presser. I got to be honest, like we'll see how it goes. That's exactly what Fred VanVleet said last year. So the fact that he said, we'll see how it goes, we'll see how this new offense looks, it didn't scream, I'm bought in. But it seems like through the process of going through, the camaraderie of the team, he's always been a team guy. He's always been a guy who just, he cares about his teammates, and he's always shown that. So I think the camaraderie with Jakob, with Dennis, having some continuity from last year with Scottie, Otto, Gradey, Thad, even though he's missing Fred VanVleet, I think because he has Yak, because, he and Dennis have bonded over soccer, hot take, I think there's just enough here to keep him comfortable. And I think a comfortable Siakam is a good Siakam. So we start there. And yeah, I don't know if I said A or A minus. I'll give him an A minus because, I haven't even talked about it. His defense has been better. It hasn't been great. There's still some late rotations. His shooting has been, not great. He didn't shoot well from the line, whatever. Stroke it up to just a veteran working into it. I'll give him a solid A minus. I appreciate the effort. I appreciate the buy-in. Moving on to OG Anunoby. How do you not give an A plus to a guy who, shot 60% from the field? Okay. Like 60% of the field, was easily your best or second best defender on every single night, shot 47% from three. Like, how do you not do more? Like, how do you not give that guy an A plus? Well, I'm not going to give him an A plus. I would give OG Anunoby a solid B plus. I think there have been times that, and please do not accuse me of hating on OG Anunoby. I think there have been some pretty troll comments coming at me the last couple of days. I I love OG. But apart from the last game that he played, I didn't love his preseason. I think the movement is still a little bit clunky. I think the decision making is still a little bit behind where it needs to be, especially if we are to believe that Darko Rajakovic is going to be using him more as a secondary ball handler on ball screens, as not the screener, as the ball handler. He's going to have to get a little bit tighter with his handle. He's going to have to get a little bit more dynamic. I do like how he's attacking. I also, have appreciated the fact that he's not doing anything outside of the offense. He's let the offense sort of flow. It just hasn't flowed towards him. And I think the spacing in some of the lineups that he's played in has been absolutely abysmal. So, on the one hand, he's playing incredibly on defense and he's shooting very efficiently, even though he's not shooting on super high volume. On the other end, he is probably the best thing about the spacing of the starting lineup right now, and probably the only thing really holding it afloat other than absurd shooting splits from Scottie Barnes. But I haven't loved his gamesmanship, like his knowing where to be, knowing when to go, when not to go. So let's give it a B plus. I think it's a B plus. I think he can be better. I think he will be better. And if the Raptors have any hope, as much as I say this is on Scottie and Pascal, he is almost equally as big a part of it. I know some fans see him as the definitively third most important player on this team. I think they're all equally important in a different way. Scottie for his overall impact, his leadership, his toughness, the ascent, the brand, the business, side of basketball. It's very important Scottie Barnes have a great season. Pascal, from the stability, isolation scoring, having a go-to guy to get you easy buckets when the offense sort of stalls in the half court. Probably, even though Scottie has naturally made a tremendous leap in terms of his half court scoring so far in preseason, I do think Pascal Siakam is still probably your most likely double team draw as a half court scorer. So it will be important in an offense like this, which is predicated on movement, that when you do go up against a tougher team, that you do have somebody who can draw a double. I think that could be Scottie. I think that could be Pascal. I think there's a debate, a reasonable debate that's happening on X/Twitter about who the Raptors' best player is right now. It's funny. I always said I would be the voice of balance and reason. And I think most people would say I have been very, very kind when it comes to the coverage of Scottie Barnes. If not, some people would go the other way. Not the other way. They would go to the extreme and say, this has basically been a Scottie worship channel. I read today somebody saying, look at Damian Lillard's numbers. Scottie Barnes is better. Bro, shut up. Okay, chill. We can debate whether he will be better at some point. Absolutely. And I think that's very much in the cards, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that when we get to the part about what I think Scottie can be offensively very soon. But he is not currently better than Damian Lillard. I don't speak for him, but I don't think he thinks he's better than Damian Lillard. I don't think how someone can say that with a straight face and not look stupid. But he is better, as in he's better than he was last year, and that's what we're looking for. And, he's flashing all sorts of signs that he could be the type of franchise cornerstone that you can actually build this thing around. So, phew, for Masai Ujiri, right? Naturally, I've never been of the mindset of trade Scottie for anybody. I've been on record saying I wouldn't trade him for anybody. I've never wavered on that. I'm never going to waver on that. That being said, he's 22 years old. It was preseason. Relax with the, told you so's and the Damian Lillard stuff. This is how I think people end up looking really stupid at the end. Speaking of people looking really stupid at the end, let's talk about what I would grade Scottie's preseason. I would grade Scottie's preseason. Man, honestly, how could I give it anything but an A+, right? He was okay. You know what? I'm going to give it an A. I'm going to give it an A, not an A+. And I'll tell you why. 3 assists to 3 turnovers is not great. I will tell you, however, that there is a great part of everything that he was doing, which is somehow, despite being so active, so disruptive, and so, he's really going for it, right? With the blocks and the steals, like he's digging at the ball, he's swiping at things, he's there are at least 10 times where he went for a block and he just didn't get it. And it's like maybe if he tried to jump like a quarter second earlier, he would have definitely timed it. He's going for a lot of those blocks and steals to convert the possession, and he's not picking up fouls at all. He averaged less than a foul per game. I think that is massively understated. I don't know if he picked up like one offensive foul in the entire 4 games. Like this is very rare. The turnovers are not concerning to me at all, but they're not good necessarily. He's trying a lot of things. I think he was a little bit loose with the ball a couple of times. There's like one possession against the Kings. There was another, possession. He's young. He's young. He's seeing things. But I think with the amount that he has had the basketball, you could ask, like, he doesn't have more assists. Is he really a point guard? I'm kind of struggling to understand who he's supposed to pass to. The lane is congested, the shooter is covered, Pascal is right next to him, or he's spacing out to the corner. Defenses are not stopping him. I think he's doing the right thing. He's making defenses pay attention to him as he goes to the paint. So I'll give him an A just because I don't want to be an absolute homer and give him an A+. But yes, my heart says A+, my brain says A, because I think that he could have been just a little bit better. But the shooting was encouraging. The transition play was encouraging. How he commanded pace was encouraging. His defensive effort, his energy, his willingness to just get up and down the court. This is a guy who was like chasing. His versatility. I was talking the other day about like, who's your best center? Scottie. Who's your best point guard? Scottie. Who's your best? We could legitimately make a case that he's probably your best option at every single position other than the 4, which is currently occupied by Pascal Siakam. He's your best option at every position other than the 4. So, it's weird, right? The lineups with him at the 5 are probably better, in theory, at least activity-wise, versatility-wise, shooting-wise, than the lineups with Jakob. The lineups with him at the 1 are better than the lineups with Dennis Schroder because, again, but you don't have 4 Scottie Barnes to put around your 1 Pascal Siakam. So at some point, and please don't get me started on the spacing of that lineup, but at some point you are going to have to concede to the fact that you might have to close some games with him at the 5. I think he showed some promise in that situation. I don't necessarily think he would even mind. I think he's just, this idea of Scottie wants to play points. Scottie wants to play. I think Scottie just wants to make, winning plays. I think Scottie just wants, he's going to be a point guard, whatever position he plays. You put him at 3, 2, 1, 4, 5. It doesn't matter. It's just like the thing with Jokic and Giannis and Joel Embiid. Like, look at how they played last year and tell me they were not their team's almost de facto point guards. They were. They had the ball in their hands. This is a point guard role. I don't even know what this position means anymore to you. Some people see it as you got to be like Andre Miller and Jose Calderon. That's just definitely not true. You don't have to be a scoring guard. It just means the person who is most responsible for dictating pace for their team. And I think Scottie has been that for the Raptors, and I think he's done a really good job. So A for Scottie. Now we get the 3 major ones out of the way. Gary Trent Jr. Let's give him a B. Honestly, there was some hot shooting. There was 42% off the off the bench. He's accepted that role, it seems. I think the playmaking was encouraging, even if the stats are not saying like he was some incredible playmaker with 2.3 assists. I think he was making passes that he was simply missing last year, and I think that was good. He gambled a little bit too much for my liking, especially if Darko is saying they don't want to gamble as much. He might be the one player who has the green light to gamble as much as he wants. He gambled for a lot. He got 1.7 steals, but I shudder to think what the box score is missing on the number of blow-bys he gave up on the steals he didn't get. So I think overall, you got to stay competitive as a defender, right? He's going to give up. He's going to basically be sold on almost every defensive matchup. I think playing off the bench might help him. As much as I'm absolutely on the record saying I would start him, and I would probably start him, I think defensively, you get away with a little bit more when he comes off the bench and has to go up against bench units, and then he can light them up, and he kind of gets to run that unit a little bit, get more shots up. I think the shots just aren't there for him right now with OG, Scottie, Pascal. Jakob is apparently going to be a post hub. Dennis Schroder is going to take his 10, 12. It's difficult to say how Gary Trent can be most effectively utilized. So I hope that he accepts this bench role, even though it's not probably easy when you're 24 years old in a contract year and you have somebody starting ahead of you that you think that you're probably better than. And, definitely you can make a very good case that he's a better player than Dennis Schroder right now. I think overall, this could end up working really well for the Raptors, especially if they play Pascal or Scottie with that second unit and they can kind of have two-man action and, have shooters around them. And I think it could be interesting lineup synergy. That's what I'll say. Going back, Dennis Schroder. I think, I'm inclined to say B minus, C plus, something in that range. He's the new guy, right? I mean, he's the one guy who's not completely in rhythm, even though they played all summer and they played all summer together and they tried to get acclimated. He's the veteran. He's also coming off, a very tiring summer training camp with Team Germany, then the World Cup, and then he wins it. And okay, so the World Championship. Sorry, did I say World Cup? Oh, World Championship. So, it's difficult to say. The shooting is going to be a struggle all year. Like, I can almost guarantee he's not going to shoot above 34% from three. And that has been a bit of a harping point in the lives. I think that's an issue. The good thing is he's getting off the ball. He's attacking in terms of, open driving lanes. He's making defenses pay for closing out kind of in a scramble. He's making quicker decisions. He's allowing himself to play off the ball a little bit more, not really dominating possessions. There were like maybe 6 or 7 times where I felt, okay, he's crawling it a little bit. But man, after watching Fred VanVleet for an entire year crawl the pace of the game, this was a bit refreshing for me to see a guard who's actually willing to do some of the stuff that I was hoping Fred would do last year, which is get off the ball, take open shots, etc. He's not the shooter Fred is. He's a slightly quicker attacker off the dribble, quicker first step than Fred. So that could be a good thing. It's hard, however, because this entire starting lineup that I just described, they all need the exact same thing, which is they need more spacing. With more spacing, I think he could be more effective. He would have wider driving angles. So would OG, so would Scottie, so would Pascal. And for Jakob Poeltl, Darko saying, I want to run him like Domantas Sabonis. If you put Domantas Sabonis with 3 non-shooters and exclusively 1 shooter, he would really struggle. He would not be an all-NBA guy. So every single player in the starting lineup needs the exact same thing, which is they need more movement shooting around them. Where do you get it? When these are your starters, that will be the topic for the next part of this video. All right, let's quickly buzz through the bench. Malachi Flynn. 37% from the field, 40% from 3. He had 2 bad games and 2, let's call it good-ish games. He rebounded well. I think he's trying. He's trying and, like someone brought it up the other day, how much did Nick Nurse damage his self-esteem? Is it good to see him just get a small victory? Let's just say get out of preseason and just keep his job, not be bumped out, I don't know how long he's going to keep his job. I just want to be clear on that. I think Javon Freeman Liberty should probably push him. Personally, I was obviously on record saying I think, I'm not sure how much he's going to play. I know we're all talking backup point guard. There is a reason that he could play. And, the 40% three-point shooting, if that can stay, like if he can do that all year, great, right? Because he took a lot of them, right? He took 3.8. That's as many as OG in 4 less minutes. He's taking more threes than anyone in your starting lineup per minute. That's a good thing. And he's hitting them at 40%. That's also a good thing. I seem to remember, just watching his tape in college and thinking he had a really good shot. Like, I don't know what's happened to it the first 3 years, but if he's regained some of that, like if he has that back, then I can understand at least the theory behind why they think he was the right player to pick. in this situation. So with two not so great games and two good-ish games, let's give Malachi a C plus. I think his defense is not good. I think his command of pacing and just his reads and advanced reads are not great. However, in those second units, he was often not really playing point. Also, as the smallest guy on the court, to be able to get that many rebounds shows hustle, initiative. I think he pushed the pace a couple times really well. He did find Gradey for a couple of nice shots in the last game. It was a couple of nice shots or good shots. I think his spacing and off-ball movement has been decent. So, clearly he's in the cards. Let's put it that way, because apart from your top, let's say 5-6 players, he was the leading minutes getter after Gary Trent. I mean, he played more minutes off the bench than any player, because Gary missed a game, than any player on your team. Let that go to your head for a second. So they see something in him. I'm not sure, but I'm willing to be proven wrong. Let's see what it is, right? I hope for his sake, for his family's sake, for his dad's sake, who clearly, we've talked a couple times, Eric and I. I hope that they get a good return out of this, because like, as much as I was very upset because of the dollars and cents being taken off of Jeff's table and the food being taken off of his table, because, again, when you are late first round pick, undrafted, second round guy, whatever, the money isn't nearly as glamorous as you think. You have a lot of people relying on you. It is serious. And for Malachi, this is a do or die year. One more year like last year, he's not in the league anymore. I promise you that. This is not a player type that is being prioritized by scouts. If he were to enter the draft cycle, identical draft cycle, next year is the week, so maybe he go first round. If he was in the draft last year, he would be very lucky to be a late second round pick as the same prospect. Scouts are just prioritizing bigger playmakers. He is very small. So this is a final crack for Malachi Flynn. I hope he makes the most of it. All right, moving on. Jakob Poeltl. I think Jakob has one of the biggest adjustments to make. On the one hand, he is the one player who Darko has talked about a lot, like running the offense through the post. These are 4 players that you would never want to put. Like, if you could build a hypothetical 2K team and say, okay, Jakob Poeltl is your one constant. He's going to be a post hub, like a Marc Gasol or a very, very homeless man's Nikola Jokic, like that type, right? And you're going to put the ball on the post, or Vlade Divac. I think like Nikola Jokic is like pretty ambitious, because Nikola Jokic is doing a lot of stuff that these guys aren't even talking about. But someone like that, or maybe like a super late in his career Arvydas Sabonis back in Portland. So you're going to put the ball in the high post, low post, etc., and you're going to allow him to just be a release valve, right? You're going to allow him, and if the defense is cross-matched or he has a favorable matchup, he can just attack off of one dribble or a little bit of a post-up. He's obviously very comfortable in that 6 to 7 foot range. He's pretty efficient. He's been efficient for a while now. He has good touch around the basket. So it's not like he's a non-scorer. This is not necessarily like Kwame Brown, right? He's not going to be inefficient and he can't shoot. That's a disaster for spacing. He's not a disaster for spacing. He's just not something that helps your spacing necessarily. He does help it as a screener, but the screening is diminished when you don't have shooters. It's such a shitty situation for him too, because on the one hand, he did come here to play with Fred VanVleet, and in an ideal world, if Houston could get him right now, I don't know how he would fit, because Alperen Sengun is there. But let's say Alperen Sengun was not there, and you could just put him in place of Alperen Sengun as their starting center, and now you have a lineup of Fred VanVleet, Jakob Poeltl, and then you have these 3 shooters, right? Well, in theory, shooters, Jalen Green, who has not shot very well, but is in theory a shooter, Jabari Smith, who has not shot well, but is in theory a shooter, and maybe one other player, even if that player is a non-shooter. Just the very fact that you have 3 shooters around, I think it could drastically unlock a completely different Jakob Poeltl. I think he would fit very well there. Here, however, with a Pascal Siakam, who often slashes into the paint, works in the mid-range, Scottie Barnes, same thing. OG Anunoby, trying to be the same thing. And Dennis Schroder. the same thing. You've shrunken down the floor so much. So all of those wide angles to, attack, he's having to dribble through double teams too. This is one player who really needs spacing as well. So in a really weird way, I mean, it's not really an optimal situation for him either. Seems to be working his way into it. I think the defense has been okay. I don't know. What am I going to give him? C plus. A C plus for effort. Okay. Jalen McDaniels. I've been very impressed, right? I mean, he's not shooting lights out from three. I think there's been a couple of years where he shot 37% or 40% from three. 30.8% is not something that I expect to continue. He is taking them on a decent-ish volume, trailing Malachi Flynn. I mean, the bench is basically just letting them fly, right? Gradey Dick, Malachi Flynn, Jalen McDaniels is like a 3-point barrage off the bench for the Toronto Raptors. I think he's been great. I think this might be. Do I want to give him an A plus? No, I don't want to give him an A plus. I'll give him an A minus. I think he's been great. I think his switchability, his versatility, his gamesmanship, like just how he's moving, how he's cutting in transition, how he's allowing the game to come to him, how switchable he is, how he's unlocking some of the angles by, cutting back door and slashing when needed, filling lanes in transition. I think he's just been a really error-free basketball player for you. And again, he's just approaching his prime now. And he's long as hell. And he's a big wing. And I'm not going to say he can switch 1 through 5, but he can comfortably switch 2 through 4. And that is a hell of a get with the biennial exception. I think I've already said it, I think it might be the steal of the Raptors offseason. I think he's he's making 3 times less than Dennis Schroder. You really think he's worth 3 times less than Dennis Schroder? This was a complete botch job. He must have, understood the player type that the Raptors have. I mean, he mentioned it. He wanted to play around players who were kind of his size, and that was interesting for him. So, and hey, look, teams develop different types of guys, right? One of the things I will say is that sometimes teams have a knack for developing a certain type of player, and the Raptors, Jama, like historically, like this team, even Darko, like if you think about Darko not as a Raptors coach, but what he's done in Memphis, if they could somehow convert him into a 3-4-5 as opposed to a 2-3, he might just have a completely different career trajectory. That might be crazy. I don't know if it's possible. I don't know if he's strong enough, whatever, but he might just be big enough to be a small ball big. And if he could be a small ball big with his versatility and his switchiness and his shooting, this almost entirely solves like a really major issue for you, which is a lack of stretch big. Could he play small ball 5? I don't know. But I've seen him play 4, and it has been interesting at times, but I've really liked him. So A minus, A, something along those lines. Precious Achiuwa in his 1 game, 17 minutes, he had 9 points, took 8 shots, missed all 3 of his threes, got to the line 4 times, right? He was pretty active, I would say. He had 6 rebounds. He was very active, actually. He's just very disruptive. 2 blocks, 2 steals. I mean, the box score is completely filled up, right? I think his decision-making is better. I think maybe he feels better. I wonder if Precious Achiuwa is exactly the type of player. And, I talk about the types of players that the Raptors have some experience developing. Precious Achiuwa is the model Raptor. In so many ways, I'm so high on him last preseason because this is your model. Like, this is exactly the type of defender, the type of athlete, the type of player that you've had success with, Pascal Siakam, etc. He is, however, more athletic than any player you've had in your program in a really long time. That's including Scottie. That's including a lot of players. That's including DeMar. He's on a completely different level as an athlete. This goes into something as a bit of a sidebar from the grading. The Raptors really like archetypes. I'm noticing this with Gradey Dick as well, and we'll talk about it when we grade Gradey's performance. And I was very high on Gradey during preseason. but they do like to bat on the maximum upside for spacing. The player type of a Scottie Barnes versus a player type of a Cade Cunningham, Jalen Suggs, etc., they're looking at max outcomes, realistic max outcomes. Obviously, max outcome as everybody turns into Michael Jordan, but like the realistic, fully 99th percentile outcome for the type of prospect that you're drafting, right? The 99th percentile outcome for a player like a Scottie Barnes is like MVP, like 5-time MVP, 4-time MVP. Like that's the player type. That's the archetype. The 99th percentile outcome for a guy like Precious Achiuwa, if everything hits for someone like him, is easily like a defensive player of the year, all defense, first team, that type of player. Like it is brutal, the upside that this guy has athletically at this age. Like, I mean, if he can just put it together mentally, and that's the part of the game that I think Darko can really help him with, because he's a very smart player, actually. You talk to anybody around the team, they'll tell you Precious is a really freaking smart player. So he's a really smart player, and he's a little bit raw in terms of his overall decision making and feel for the game. Well, guess what? Now you have a coach who's actually expertly capable of teaching that. And again, Darko, I mean, look, Jonathan Kuminga is thriving. Don't tell me Jama did not have anything to do with that. I know it's preseason, but like this is a player that Jama definitely worked with a lot over the last 2 years. And I think that he can take a lot of notes from, I think between Jama and Darko, if they can kind of make it a joint mission that for this entire experiment to work, this is the one player that we have to convert into a defensive beast who can stretch the floor. He is not only quick enough to go 1 through 5, probably guard 1 through 5, just like OG. I think his defensive upside is better than OG. Upside, 99th percentile. His 99th percentile defensive outcome is better than OG because I think he's more athletic. He covers ground just a little bit quicker. He's faster in transition. He's definitely a better rebounder. He is a better weak side shot blocker. He has a lot of edges on OG, where OG sees the game defensively a lot better than Precious does. I think Precious has the body type and the athleticism to become the type of defender that like it doesn't feel real, right? I'm not talking Victor Wembanyama, but I am talking about something very otherworldly. There are things that I've seen him do live, either during defensive drills, and you're just like, I can't believe he got there, right? Like the space that this guy can cover in the full court is incredible. Transition defense is incredibly important thing, just as half court defense is important if you're going to play fast. I think he could be very disruptive, and I think that he can change ends so quickly. So the upside is as high as ever, but I am more confident that with Darko and Jama in play, like they will actually be able to unlock some of it. So for his one game, I'll give him an incomplete because it's really hard to judge one game. But if that one game was duplicated 4 times, then he would be getting an A. Like, I mean, he was really good. Okay. Gradey Dick. I will give Gradey, I'll give Gradey an A-. I know this is a lot of A's and B's, but I think the Raptors played generally very well. What do you want me to say? You want me to shit on somebody and give him a D for nothing? Like, I mean, I think he played really, really well. I was never concerned about the shooting. I know that shot's going to go in. He wasn't the greatest corner 3-point shooter, so it was in college. He was, more above the break and, from the key. And so I'm looking at this more from the perspective of like, what can he do right now that I wasn't expecting him to be able to do? Well, I'm going to tell you, even after studying some of his tape, I didn't quite see, like I knew he would be a better than guard average rebounder, but the way that he's tipping shots, I mean, his measurements are not insane. Like his reach does not necessarily give him an advantage. But there are some guys you just say they have a nose for the basketball. He has a nose for the basketball. Defensively, I think he'll be able to do some things as an offensive rebounder, defensive rebounder, maybe even some passing lane stuff. Like he's deceptively large as a human being. Like he's really like 6'8", 6'9". Like he's big. I think he measured at 6'7", 6'8", but like it looks to me like when he's standing next to someone who is actually 6'8", that he looks bigger than them. So I'm not really sure, but I mean, he's absolutely a guard. He is fluid. He may not be bursty or athletic, but he is fluid as an athlete. He's not moving around like a guy like a Duncan Robinson early on, like where it's stiff movement. And he is 19 years old. I preface everything by saying he is 19 years old. For a player who's 19 years old, again, talking about archetypes, this is an archetype that projects out to be an all-star. I was really impressed with his overall tenacity, his composure. I know there's been a lot of stuff about he's not seeing the game fast enough. It's too fast for him right now. Not relative to any other rookie. Do you know what I mean? Like the reason that I'm not noticing this is because I expect this from every rookie. Like I expected this from Scottie. You expect this from almost anyone other than maybe LeBron James coming into a preseason game, that the game is going to be a little bit fast, that is going to be a little bit of adjustment. I think he's seeing things a little bit late, but I'm just encouraged that he is seeing them. You know what I mean? Like he might cut like a quarter second late, or he might call out a screen like a half second late, or he might notice a defensive rotation. He got better. Like I think he got a little bit better with every single game. He is, he's called himself a sponge. There are guys on this team, Thaddeus Young, Otto Porter Jr., Garrett Temple, who he has seemingly meshed with, and guys who are taking him under his wing. I think these guys will help him to just understand some of the vet moves and just keep him on track. I think there are some adults in the room. It is a good thing. It is really, I know that everyone was saying, waive Garrett Temple, waive Garrett Temple. If Garrett Temple is here to play 15 minutes a night for you, like Will Barton was last year, then yes, please waive him, because he cannot do that for you effectively without killing your offense. However, he is a good shooter. He is a long-term pro. And as much as people like to clown on these end-of-bench guys who sort of bought into their role, they actually are very important. If you look at one of the most successful runs that the Raptors had, the first iteration of the Raptors that really burst onto the scene in North America, who was at the end of that bench, right? You had a lot of veterans. You had Muggsy Bogues. You had Kevin Willis. These guys are very important. Charles Oakley, Antonio Davis, Doug Christie. I mean, there was, for a little bit of time, there was a Mark Jackson. Like, I mean, you had adults in the room. It really does help. And I think that it would be impossible for me to untether the success of Vince and Tracy McGrady, guys like that, and just say, well, it had nothing to do with the fact that you had Charles Oakley there, who had literally played with Michael Jordan and could give them all of these insights and be like, you know what I mean? When someone has played with Jordan, they come into it with a bit of cachet. I realize that, Thaddeus Young hasn't played with Michael Jordan, but Thaddeus Young did once upon a time, as a McDonald's All-American, guard Kevin Durant in live action, right? I mean, he's been around the block. I mean, when you grew up, like think about all these kids playing NBA 2K, right? I mean, they grew up and they probably played with Thaddeus Young. Do you know what I mean? Like there is a sort of element of respect in there. Otto, everyone knew about Otto. Saw him go top 3 in the draft. I mean, this is, a player who's made it to this point. He's a 9-year vet, 10-year vet at this point, 11-year vet. I mean, he's been around. There's a certain cachet when these guys talk, not just about the game, off, how to take care of your body during the season. It's one thing for a dietitian or whatever. The very idea of how do I get around these things that I'm supposed to do? What are the things that I can't get around? What is the tip to recover quickly? What, this thing that this coach told me, how do I deal with that? These types of things. I mean, it's so important. So I think that, again, like to just sort of stay on topic here, I think Gradey is going to be fine. Chris Boucher, I didn't love the summer, the preseason from him overall. I realized that he was kind of put into some tough situations where he was starting in place of Jakob Poeltl. He was active. I'm not worried about Chris Boucher at all. Like he is going to be who he's going to be, right? He's been that player like for the last 3-4 years. He's going to be a guy who's going to not crater your offense as long as you keep his minutes kind of short. He's going to be an energy guy. Let's give him a C+. Thaddeus Young, I'm sort of surprised to see he shot 60% from the field. He was pretty much unplayable. Like the lineups with him really suffered. I think some of his reads were late. Again, this is an older veteran who probably doesn't give a shit about preseason. He's probably, got an idea. Like he talks about it last year too. The idea is to ramp yourself up, be ready for January. And a lot of veterans approach things this way. So I'm not really worried about Thaddeus Young in preseason. If Thaddeus Young is playing anything more than 10 minutes a night for you at any point, I think you're pretty much screwed anyway with this existing spacing. Again, Thaddeus Young, another guy who, yes, you could in a pinch, like the Raptors did last year when Pascal Siakam got injured. Yeah, you could use him as a small ball four or, a post hub or a guy to, provide some secondary playmaking. But without the shooting of a Fred VanVleet there, I mean, he'll be relegated pretty much exclusively to the second unit, and maybe he can give you a little bit of injury relief at some point. But I think right now the Raptors have him primarily as a veteran leader, but also as trade fodder at the deadline, because he's an expiring contract, I think, of $8 million. Okay, Otto Porter in his one game. I'll also give him an incomplete. Honestly, I'm a huge Otto Porter fan, as you know. One of my favorite players for a really long time now. I've really, really liked him. And I think that he can give the Raptors a lot off the bench, right? I think he could be probably, I'm talking about Scottie closing lineups as your small ball big, as your small ball five. The most ideal person to do that actually would be Otto, because he can give you all the spacing. He's a reputable shooter. Defenses have to respect him. They have to adjust. They'll probably have to put a small on him, which might give you a big to attack off the dribble, might open up some lanes. If they put a big on him, well, now the paint is open. In either case, if he's standing 25 feet from the basket and you're not paying attention to him, you're giving up probably 2 points. If he's wide open, you're probably giving up like 1.6 points, 1.7 points on average. I mean, it's not something that most coaching staffs would live with, so they would have to adjust to him playing five. Defensively, he's big enough. I mean, he's not tall enough. But physically, he's big enough to play small ball five and not kill you. He's long. He's extremely smart, and he is deceptive. Like he's deceptively strong and long, and he gets his hand on a lot of stuff. Like in terms of passing lanes, shot blocking, etc. He was at one point 6 years ago, I think you could probably count him as one of the top 4 or 5 defenders in the NBA. I think he was one of the top 4 or 5 defenders in the NBA. I watched him a lot and was a really huge fan of that. But those instincts haven't gone away. Some of the burst and athleticism has, but the instincts haven't gone away. So I expect Otto, if healthy, to make a really big dent for the Raptors this year. Mohamedou Gay, I liked him, in his limited minutes. I think he was very active. He has been waived. Let's give it an incomplete because he's been waived. Javon Freeman Liberty, I loved him. There's my A+. I'll give you an A+. That's my A+. Honestly, every second that this guy had on the court, he made something of it. Like, I think fans are going nuts over him for a good reason. He's very young. I've compared him to Norman Powell. Honestly, man, like I watched Norman and I think if I watched them side by side at the same age, or at least at the same place in their careers, I might actually be a little bit higher on Javon. I don't know. I've liked him through the entire process from when he came on to like the more I dug into him. I love the signing. I was shocked that he was available. I'm shocked that someone didn't see, what he was doing in summer league. Like I was just like, oh my God, this guy's going to get a guaranteed contract. He ends up on a 2-way. I think this might be a player that at some point this season, you might have to think about converting if he continues to play like this. I mean, what he's doing is really impressive. In a lot of ways, he combined 3 players that you've lost. He combined sort of the headiness and let's call it like gamesmanship of a Jeff Dowtin. He gave you like the rebounding and activity of a Justin Champagnie, and he's giving you sort of the speed and like quickness of a Delano Banton. Like say what you will about Delano Banton. The guy was going a mile a minute all the time. You combine all those three players into a smaller package, you pretty much have Javon Freeman Liberty. And of course, you have shooting coming from him. So maybe he's giving you a little bit of Joe Wieskamp. So it's like all four of the players that you got rid of had a love child, and that love child is Javon Freeman Liberty. We didn't get to see a ton of the shooting, but he can absolutely stroke it. And I think that he could be a welcome addition to a bench unit. I've already said I think he is on par, close to, should be in debate, pushing somebody ahead of the rotation already. I don't know. I'm curious to see what the Raptors plan to do with Gary Trent Jr. going forward. But if you're thinking long term, this could be Gary Trent Jr. replacement like in a couple of years. You don't know. Like, I don't know. You may not know. I definitely don't know. But I think he fits. I think he fits with 0.5 offense. He moves really quickly. He does almost everything that he needs to do in 2 dribbles. It's super efficient. His game is so compact, and he's just quick. Like, he's really quick. And unlike most guys who are quick at that age, he knows how to use it. Like, he's not going all the time one speed. He knows how to slow down and then burst off. I've been very impressed with him. Clearly, my only A+. Garrett Temple, I mean, I don't know. Am I evaluating him for the player that he is in his 9 minutes across 3 games? Not really. I think for the rest of them, I just have to give it an incomplete, right? Like, Garrett Temple is not here to play basketball games for you. He is a shooter. He didn't shoot necessarily super well. He missed almost all of his shots in preseason, but he is a guy who has shot the ball really well throughout his career. If you need to be playing Garrett Temple anything more, as I said with Thaddeus Young, but I think it applies even double to Garrett Temple. He is not. I think I looked at his box plus minus like throughout his career. I don't think he's ever had a positive box plus minus year in his life. He's just been like kind of like, do you know, like there's 450 players in the NBA. Garrett Temple is like the 200th best player in the NBA for like 8 years. Like, I think like you could make a case that he was like the 200th to 250th best player at all times throughout most of his career. Or maybe the 180th to 2. Like, it's a really strange career. These do exist. Typically I tend to like these guys a lot because, they're pretty egoless, and say what you will now about what their career became, but these guys were all very highly recruited, and they all had huge high school careers, etc. So kind of buying into that role is very inspiring too. You need people like that in your locker room. You need guys who are egoless in that sense, that they can stay professional, right? They're not going to get overweight and completely get out of shape. Thaddeus Young is a super pro in that sense too. He definitely keeps himself in shape. He's working out, he's dripping sweat, and you're just like, bro, you ain't played in like 2 weeks. Like, what are you dripping sweat for? But that's the professionalism. That's the example. That's who Thaddeus Young has been. That's what's led him to this point. So you need that example for the young kids. Like, hey, my vet is not playing. I'm also not playing. He is dripping sweat. How could I do anything less? You know what I mean? It's very important. So having Garrett Temple there. Okay, I said I wasn't going to grade any of these guys. Jeff Dowtin, I just want to say, Jeff pretty much averaged like 34 points per 36 minutes. In his lonely 8 minutes, he had 2.67 points per shot, made all 3 of his shots. Let's give Jeff an A++ for his 8 minutes. I'm just kidding. Okay, let's move on. I want to flashback. So what do I want to talk about first? Okay, we got 48 comments. Let me take a moment to respond to some comments here. Gradey's cutting was a lot better. Achua, change your name so we can pronounce. He doesn't need to change his name so he can pronounce. Jalen Harris had potential. Yeah. Robert says Schroder is going to take more threes than you think. Darko thinks he has more than he's shown. I'm not saying it will be successful, but Darko thinks he can create more space that way. Oh boy. Yeah, I heard that quote too. Look, Darko thinks everyone is capable of more. At some point, I'm not trying to disagree with the head coach of the Toronto Raptors who's been coaching longer than I've been alive, probably, or at least he's been coaching basketball since I've pretty much been a child. But at some point, someone has to do less too, right? And you can't have, okay, well, Scottie's going to be Magic Johnson, and Pascal's going to be All NBA, and OG is going to be, he's going to be the second coming of Mikal Bridges this year, and Jakob's going to be Domantas Sabonis, and Dennis Schroder is going. There's one ball. Someone is going to have to take a back seat, and I think that it's very clear who that person is going to be in the starting lineup. It's now going to be Pascal, and it's now going to be Scottie, and it's probably not going to be OG. So you can just deduce from there, right? I mean, I don't know what is being said outwardly. I hope that message is not being relayed inwardly. He has said, what's he supposed to say in that situation too? Sometimes the media asks some really stupid questions, right? Like, do you think he can do more? No, I think he can do less. Like, what do you want him to say, right? I mean, if the way the offense is going so far is any indication, then I don't think that Dennis Schroder is going to even touch 25, 27, 28% usage. I think his honest career, he's 25% usage guy. Just to put that in perspective, I think Fred VanVleet's like closer to 20, 22. Okay. I think Pascal Siakam's close to 25. So it has been quite ridiculous how much Dennis Schroder has had the ball for someone who's so inefficient throughout his career. I hope that will change with the Raptors and that it can be just open threes, corner threes, find a spot on the court. That's your hot zone. Like, I mean, he hits big ones, right? It's so funny. When I talked to Jeff's trainer, we talked about the raw self promotion. Like the number of highlights that Dennis Schroder has hitting big threes, you would think he hits them all the time. I mean, his percentages are absolutely abysmal, but that's the raw self promotion, right? When you have a swaggy response, ESPN, they talk about it. Dennis Schroder putting the injection into his veins, the ice water in his veins. That's a celebration. The entire team is doing it now. That's a Dennis Schroder celebration. He's a very loud player. He's very animated. He's also been very good for chemistry from what I've heard. So, again, the sort of self-promotion thing can kind of cloud reality, but the reality is 2 points is 2 points, 3 points is 3 points. And if you shoot 30% from three on high volume, you're hurting your team almost always. That being said, what's the alternative? Don't take the shot? No, that is not the fair alternative. You have to take shots so the offense generates. However, let's talk about that when we get to let's talk about more advanced basketball takes. The player that the Raptors are missing. I'm going to talk about the player the Raptors missing. Man, we're an hour into this live, and I'm still on grading these picks. Am I just going really too slowly, or like this is Sunday morning Rob? Okay, it's going to take 5 hours to do 1 hour of content. Okay, let's get faster. Okay, the Scottie Barnes thing. What can Scottie be? Okay, well, he's not Dame Lillard right now. But do I think that this is the year that Scottie could be a 25 point per game scorer? People are saying All-Star is a lock. I don't know if All-Star is a lock, but I think he'll be in the conversation. Been on record several times saying I think there's 40 to 42 All-Stars every single year. But, 16 guys don't make it because they're not in the right team. Maybe they're the second best player on a really bad team that's outperforming, and it's really good because of them, and they fully deserve it. But there's no way you can justify giving 2 All-Stars to a team that bad, and so they get shafted. It happens every year. I mean, we talk about 3 to 4 snubs. There's almost always 10 guys you can make a case for. And so, typically it's going to go to, you're not going to get 2 All-Stars unless you're a really good team, right? It comes down to the coaches. Also, just so happens that your 2 potential All-Stars, like the 2 guys who realistically could make it, unless you see a case for OG Anunoby making it or Jakob Poeltl making it somehow, they happen to play the same position. So that never helps either. Unless, of course, the Eastern Conference coaches see Scottie Barnes as a guard. And they should, because he's playing guard, and he is playing guard almost exclusively right now. So maybe. But this 25, 8, 7 type of production that people are talking about, I want to take it back to something that Brian Macon said in our interview. Brian, for those of you who don't know, maybe newer to this channel, Brian is Scottie's trainer. And I had a sit down with Scottie's trainer a few months ago. And this is what he had to say back then. Pull that up.
Half court through like half court. Once he's able to score 6 to 8 points in a half court through like half court offense, then he's a 25-point scorer. Like, it's just like Anthony Davis. Like, Anthony Davis, like, when he was in New Orleans, he can, like, wake up, roll out of bed, and he can get 25, 15, and 5. You know what I mean? Just because
he gets easy ones. That's exactly
he gets easy ones. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, a lot of people don't get easy ones. Like, he gets easy ones without being like. That's why the ceiling is so high, because he gets easy ones, and the thing that I'm really good at, like, as a trainer, like, he's still like grasping those concepts. But once he gets at 100% and he can score 10 points in a half court, it's like, it's some shit you've never seen before.
I love that. And it's so true. By the way, thank you so much for the super chat, man. We've talked a couple of times. You helped me translate for Pen Dance. There was a trailer, and thank you so much for this, and thank you so much for that. And yeah, I really appreciate it. Okay. Where was I? Scottie Barnes. Okay. So how good do I think he can be? What do I think he needs to do? Look, as I mentioned, the league will adjust. Right now, they don't expect him to take the shot. He's catching a few people napping. What is he going to do after that? I think the whole plan here is that at some point, the rest of the league is going to catch up to the fact that he's willing to take 3, 4, 5, potentially 6 threes if you leave him open. It's not like last year where you can just sag back, drop coverage, and he's not going to do anything. He's going to do one of two things. Either he's going to come right at you if you close out, or if you back off completely, he's just going to let it fly, and he's going to live with the results. And he's not thinking about it, and he's taking it. And almost every single time that he's been open for a 3, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 times, he took it. No hesitation. Follow through has been pretty consistent. Form has been pretty consistent. There were a couple of, clips that I saw from a Raptors practice a few weeks ago where I was like, ooh, the form is like falling apart a little bit. It happens for newer shooters, people who are not natural 3-point shooters. Sometimes you have to adjust a little bit. You forget it's new to your brain. Your brain is not used to doing it, but he's been pretty consistent and he's taken them. And I think you have to be encouraged by that. So at some point, I think the scoring will go down a little bit and the playmaking will go up. I don't necessarily foresee 25 points per game. What Brian was saying, however, is completely true. Scottie Barnes gets easy ones. This is something that we've talked about for years off the record. When we talk about Scottie, it's how easily he gets 10 points, 10, 12 points every single game. Somehow, even when he couldn't score, he was scoring 12, 14, 15 points when he had no real discernible offensive skills, dribbling, shooting, etc. I mean, do you know how to score without being able to dribble like at a proper level? Or he sees the gaps and he attacks them, and he sees the weakness in the defense against a bad team. Like, even last year, I think he could have put up 30 on any night. It was super easy. So in terms of all-star outcomes, I think he will be an all-star level player. If not this year, then at the very least at the start of next year. But I think it will happen this year. I think from the Raptors' perspective, this is great. You need this to happen. You need the fan base to have somebody. I think right now it's very murky, right? They've always had a guy. It hasn't always been equivalent, but they've always had a guy. They had Vince, right? They had Vince. Then they had Bosch. Then they tried to have Bargnani / DeMar DeRozan. It didn't really work. They brought in Rudy Gay. They always have a guy that they can market on the merchandise. If you're paying attention to Raptors social media, if you're paying attention to the merchandising, if you're paying attention to the jerseys, if you're paying attention to the crowds, it seems very obvious to me who they're pushing as the guy. This is a business thing. You don't have to have a guy, but it helps business-wise to have a face that you can put. And that's the face. That's the face that they've chosen. And that's the direction that they're going in. And I think with more on-ball reps, I think he could have done this last year. I think a lot of what he's doing right now, he could have done last year. He's he's better, but I just don't want it to get twisted. It's not like he just learned how to do all this stuff that he's doing right now in one off season. This is not how it worked. He's been working on this stuff for 3 years and seeing fruits of this in spurts for the last 3 years and seeing bits and pieces of this even at Florida State. It's just getting tighter and more comfortable and more refined and more practiced, and he's getting stronger and his advantages going downhill. Like, I mean, Darko Rajakovic's, kind of viral quote of "God help you." That's really how it is. I mean, some people are making comparisons to Giannis. I don't think he's Giannis at all. Like, he is, but his feel for the game and his vision for the game is completely different than Giannis. And I think he's just, I'm going to lean on something that Brian said. It's just something you've never seen before. Some people say baby Jokic. Some people say Scottie Pippen. I mean, you can go down and down and down, the rabbit hole of player comparisons. I do think at the end of the day, if you were to try to do that with most generational superstars, like, it's not really possible. Can you really honestly tell me you can find a very realistic comparison for Nikola Jokic in NBA history? You could say Arvydas Sabonis, but they're not that. And that's the closest you're ever going to get to Nikola Jokic is Arvydas Sabonis. So really, but Arvydas didn't do what Jokic is doing right now. Not even close. He was one of my favorite players growing up, but that's not even close. So what I'm saying is, I mean, Victor Wembanyama is another example. You've never seen anything like it, right? Giannis Antetokounmpo, you've never seen anything like it. The closest thing was Shaq, but Shaq wasn't doing what he's doing. And so it's just like, when Brian says it's something you've never seen before, that's really the point. There is nothing to compare it to. It's going to look weird for a while until one day you look up and you're like, hey, is Scottie Barnes averaging 30, 12, and 11? Yes. Is he an MVP candidate? Yes. I think that day will come. What he needs, however, is a stretch big. I am very firm that Scottie is the type of player that will do whatever his team requires. Right now, his team requires shooting, and they require a stretch big. So he's, they required a point of attack defender. He became a point of attack defender because Fred VanVleet couldn't do it. They required, some paint protection. He became a rotating big for you last year. They required a guy to set screens for Fred before they got Jakob Poeltl in there. He did that. I mean, whatever you need, right? It's just like, hey, man, jump how high? So whatever you need from Scottie Barnes is going to give that to you right now. You need shooting, so he's going to take a lot of threes and hopefully make some. But in the ideal world, you would put 4 shooters around this guy. Him with the bench, like Louis Zatzman had a kind of sarcastic tweet yesterday or the day before. He said, putting shooters around Scottie Barnes and cutters is working really well. Who would have thunk it? And it's like, yes, this is exactly what we've been talking about for years. This is the type of team. In fact, if you recall my video, the 7 players I would not trade in a trade for Kevin Durant, Fred VanVleet was on that list. Why? Precisely because of that. Like, you want shooters around Scottie Barnes. You ideally also want shooters around Jakob Poeltl. You ideally also want shooters around Pascal Siakam. You ideally want 4 shooters around Dennis Schroder. Everyone needs more shooting in the modern NBA. And so I think these promising minutes with Scottie in the bench have been very interesting for me because you're getting a glimpse of what that could look like. The bench unit, if Christian Koloko is expected to miss a lot of time, could be something like Precious Otto, Scottie, Gradey, Gary, or some variation of that. Or maybe you replace Gradey with Jalen McDaniels, or you replace, Otto with either way, talking shooters. Almost everyone who's coming off your bench is a shooter. Even if you replace Malachi in that lineup, still a shooter. Still a guy who takes threes at a high enough volume, can keep the defense respectable. Now you start building a motion offense, 0.5, Scottie running, breaks. He's your post hub. He's your initiator who morphs into your post hub, morphs back into initiator, morphs into a spot up shooter, morphs into, a backdoor cutter, morphs into a primary initiator, and then back to a secondary initiator. This is the dream offense for a really smart player. And that's what Scottie Barnes is, a super smart player. You put pieces that move and can actually space out for him. The angles become wider. The decisions become faster. Suddenly, you have a really high octane offense. However, That is not possible with the starting lineup for a lot of reasons. Pieces are just not optimized. To those analysts out there who are saying that the Raptors are going to suck this year, I have news for you. I don't think they are. To those analysts out there who say, I don't get how this roster makes sense, now I get what you're saying. I think that they will tread water because they will be better defensively than offensively. I think even with Darko Rakovic's 0.5 offense, even if Scottie Barnes takes a step, I think they'll still struggle. But in order to unlock this fully, I think you need shooters. And I think specifically you need shooting out of that 5 position. A Marc Gasol reincarnation would be great. A Victor Wembanyama would have been nice. A Chet Holmgren, perhaps. I don't know what is available. Is it a Miles Turner? Is that the trade? You don't have a pick. I don't know how to get that guy. Do you have to develop it? Does Precious Achiuwa take a step? Is this a 2-year process of eventually developing Precious Achiuwa into your big where you can run, everything? Does Pascal surprise us? Does Pascal morph into, he's not going to morph into a movement shooter at this point, but does he morph into a guy who can at least stretch the defense out above the break in transition, where you don't have 5 guys who are all ramming to the rim? Like, you can have something that can space the court and widen the lanes a little bit for him to attack. I don't know. I think that, however, for the first time in a really long time, it is very clear who this entire thing is being built around. I think there was some confusion last year. Is it around Fred? Is it around Siakam, or is it around Scottie? It seems like everyone had a different answer depending on who you asked. It was like, yeah, well, long term it's around Scottie, but it started to be about Pascal, but now it's about Fred. It's like, this is very confusing, and this is why you have the chemistry issues that you have, because you can't pick a lane. They've picked a lane. Surprise, it's the right lane. It's the Scottie lane. Now I think you need to adjust the roster and adjust the play style around it. I think 0.5 and Darko is a great first step. You don't really have the personnel from that perspective. And in terms of, people say, well, I think this was a critique that Raptors Republic brought up in one of their podcasts earlier in the season, when they said that the Raptors would look really funky. And effectively what they said was that at some point you need someone to break down the defense. I think the Raptors have, 3-4 guys who can sort of break down the defense. Maybe they can't break it down like Ja Morant, but they can do that. But I think something that is just sort of understated, and, I think critics of the "is Scottie a point guard" narrative often bring up, is you need somebody to get into the paint. You need somebody to break down. No, actually, you don't. That isn't how all half-court offense works. You don't always need, a break it down type of guard. It's not one way to play basketball. There are many different ways to play basketball. You can pitch it into the post. You see Luka just blowing past people. It's not really how it's worked for Dallas. Dallas has been interesting offensively. They've been in the playoffs a lot of times. I mean, there are a lot of different ways to do this. Obviously, when we talk about, thinking about basketball from a higher vantage point, or call it a God's eye view or a broader view perspective, you can become very blind if you have one framework and start ascribing everything as it fits or it doesn't fit my framework of how this should look. So if you have a framework that a center needs to be 7 feet, then Precious Achiuwa or Otto Porter Jr. playing center for you is going to sound ridiculous and stupid. If you have an idea that a point guard has to be Malachi's size and, have the skill set of a Steve Francis or Stephon Marbury, then you're never going to see a point guard in Scottie Barnes, right? If you have an idea of what a superstar sounds like, or, their high school career looks like, maybe you're not going to see one, in a Nikola Jokic. See what I mean? The stripping away is important of what is actually relevant here, what is actually important, what are the core principles of basketball, stripped down to the core principles of success in basketball. And you get to very different creative solutions for some of your problems. Okay. Am I rambling at this point, or have I made a concrete projection on Scottie? I think if you get Scottie, the type of roster around him, or at the very least stagger his minutes so that he's playing with those types of players more often, players who want to run, players who want to move, players who cut backdoor, players like Chris Boucher, players like Otto, players like Gradey, players like Gary. I mean, it's like the entire bench is just full of guys that I love seeing him with. And yet I know that he's going to spend at least 15 to 18 minutes a night with the starters who he doesn't necessarily have the greatest synergy with. So I don't know. It's a really strange thing, but if it's any consolation, there's at least two guys on the bench right now in Gradey and Precious that they probably project long term as being starters. So maybe it's like, yeah, we'll suffer a little bit this year. We'll see how this thing goes, and then next year we'll just promote these guys to starters, and it'll all be kumbaya. I don't know. Okay. I think Scottie can be an all-star, though. I think, he can make a very strong case for it. Someone's saying, or Miles Turner. Brooke Lopez would have been perfect. Brooke Lopez is old. Sorry, Brooke. I mean, he's younger than me. He's a year younger than me. Like, he's 35 years old. Like, I mean, I get it, but you're not exactly in a contention window right now. He would have made you so much better. You're saying Brooke Lopez? Yes, absolutely. He would have made you so much better. 35 years old, though. And he wasn't going to come cheap to Toronto. I'll tell you that much. So, yeah. The Rockets tried to get him. I think they struck out on him. They really wanted to get him. I think that's, if I'm not mistaken, they had an offer to him. And then I think they gave that money to Dylan Brooks after. Okay. The player that the Raptors absolutely need is a stretch big. I think it really unlocks Scottie. Okay, let's move on. The good news about Jeff. Let's go with the good news about Jeff in general. Like, it's not like some breaking news or anything, but it's just generally good news, and just sort of share my little philosophy on that with you. And then I will tie that into how I think we can re-examine the broader game, like how we can talk about it in a little bit more intelligent way. I did go back and I watched some of my old videos. Here's something that I said, which has proven to be somewhat funny and kind of true, I think. Here's something that I said last year, this time. To have a team which is almost actively tanking for lottery picks, I don't think Scottie Barnes would tolerate 2 years of losing. I think he would grow depressed. I think he would start throwing temper tantrums. I think he would push for a trade. Scottie Barnes hates losing. I think he hates losing enough that he would change any losing culture into a winning culture within a year. How do I know this? I was watching a Rico Hines run, the full 2-hour version, and I counted 4 times when Scottie Barnes blasted either Pascal Siakam or Gary Trent Jr. for missing a defensive assignment. In an exhibition game, in August, he's picking up James Harden full court. This is a guy who cares. So, something that I think has gone somewhat under the radar is how much I believe he has to do with what is happening with the Raptors right now. When I was talking to Jeff's trainer, I noted to him that the one player whose body language never changed throughout all of last season was Jeff Dowtin, and how much I appreciated that. I appreciated Jeff for that. You know who's one player whose body language was consistently, like, sometimes great, sometimes not so great? Scottie. Based on what was happening on the court, if he really didn't like it, like, you could feel it. He did not like it. Ball dominance, being missed on, fast breaks and shit. He had a mismatch in the post. He didn't get the ball. He's going to let you hear about it. And it's going to be loud and it's going to be embarrassing, right? You don't want, if you're a 28-year-old, 29-year-old all-star, you definitely don't want your younger teammate coming up to you in front of 20,000 people and saying, what the hell? You don't want that. You don't want Gary Trent Jr. rolling his eyes and walking the other way as you dry heave a three. I don't think Scottie was alone in voicing his frustration, but everything that has come out this offseason is suggesting that he was not on the side of the vets in terms of, everything that just happened. And I don't need to talk too much about this. I think this is just common knowledge at this point. People have talked about it, thinly veiled, right? Based on what they know. Isn't this exactly what I said, though? If you have a losing culture, which is absolutely what a culture where guys are chasing the bag at the expense of team chemistry, at the expense of the younger development, at the expense of ball movement. If you have a losing culture, he'll sulk until you change it. This is a guy who just cares about winning. That's all he cares about. It's all he's ever cared about. He's never cared about numbers, never really been about the stats. He's never been anything other than a basketball Puritan. And that's what I've always appreciated about him. Always. I've always appreciated his ability to just mold himself into any position, any role. He went from playing point guard in EYBL to playing almost center, power forward with De'Aaron Sharp at Montverde. Like, that's a big shift, right? I mean, he fancied himself as a point guard and he went and played with Cade Cunningham. Why? Right? Wanted to play on a better team, wanted to play with more size. You know, there's a lot of other reasons, but like the point being, just wants to be around winning, wants to win, wants to be, and I think when you start to have a player like that, in that video I went on and said, I'm not really comparing him to Michael Jordan, but it is that similar thing where at some point, if your lead guy is really bothered by losing habits, your habits will change if that person has a dominant enough personality to make those changes. So I think that what was happening, what happened last year, the writing was actually on the wall the year before. I started talking about this Fred and Scottie, thing in his rookie season, like 8-9 games. If you've been on the Facebook groups, you can validate that. Of course I was talking about it for a long time. Fred's vibe with Scottie is not right, blah, 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 blah. And yeah. And, it was clear from the get-go that these guys did not see their roles and their relationship in the same light. I'm sure they've bridged the gap now, but as teammates, their synergy was sometimes like peanut butter and oil, right? As opposed to peanut butter and jelly. It wasn't really meshing at times. And so, I think that he doesn't get a lot of credit for changing the culture. We're going to credit Darko, we're going to credit Masai, we're going to credit Nick Nurse for leaving, Fred, whatever. But I think in a lot of ways, the disruption that is created, there are a lot of people in this world where they have a bad situation and they just kind of turn a blind eye to it. And there are certain people, when there's a bad situation, they disrupt things until the situation changes. I prefer the second type of person, although I respect the person who's humble enough to be the first type of person. I don't know. In the one way, I'm saying, good for Jeff for not screaming and yelling. Well, partially because, he is a two-way guy. He really is not in a position of leadership. But on the other hand, I'm very proud of Scottie for, even though he's younger, and be very easy, like when you talk about young players coming to the league, everything that happened with the Warriors last year, Draymond punching Jordan Poole. Do you think Jonathan Kuminga was out there like talking to Draymond Green about how he can't do that? Like, that would take some serious balls, right? But I imagine, and this is just my hypothetical guess stab at this, I imagine if something like that happened on the Toronto Raptors, I'm assuming that at some point Scottie would deal with it, that it would be something that he would take on himself to at least address at some point. So I think that this active leadership that he has shown in terms of just leading a charge against bad ideas has been very, very good. And it shows confidence, it shows direction, it shows a commitment and a vision. And it's not easy. I just want to say that it's not easy when your coach and your highest paid player and your starting point guard are on the opposite side of you, telling you that the way they want to do things is right, and you can still stand by your convictions and say, no, it's not, and you win. That's amazing. It's amazing because he's gotten the change that he wants. You can see it in his voice. He feels like a completely different person. You can see it on the court. I've watched Scottie for a really long time now. I've watched him since he was 16 years old. He's now 22 years old. That's 6 years of Scottie Barnes. And I went back and actually watched even more stuff from him after I heard of him. The energy that he's showing right now is who he was back then. So yeah. To the Jeff Dowtin thing. I released the video with Jeff's trainer, Brian Inge. Big shout outs to Brian for doing that. I really appreciated the conversation. The intro is a little bit stupid. I wanted to make it hype and I wanted to get it out yesterday because, Jeff might I don't know. The intro is not the best part of it. It starts out on Jeff Dowtin hitting a game winner. Definitely go check it out. It's live now on the channel. There's a minute where I think I might, if I have the time, cut it out. But then the interview is great. We talked about Kevin Durant. We talked about the Hill. We talked about DMB basketball. It's incredible. It is a really great conversation. It's very free flowing. And somebody messaged me after. I got two types of responses to this, and I want to just take a moment to just close the chapter on the free Jeff Dowtin train, because I believe that we started something here that was really great, and I just want to give kind of a closure to it. On the negative side of the comments, we'll do that. The positive side of the comments from people saying, look, I'm really hurt. I have even more appreciation for this guy now. It really is a shitty situation, et cetera, et cetera. Look, one thing that I didn't bring up in the interview is that the minute the Raptors signed Garrett Temple, the writing was kind of on the wall that unless they made a trade, maybe if they'd made a trade for Damian Lillard, this would be the perfect player to keep. And with all the Pascal Siakam trade rumors, with all of the flux, the roster flux, asking the Raptors to potentially go even closer to the tax line and cost themselves some flexibility, waiving Malachi Flynn, waiving, Garrett Temple, waiving that, whoever you waived in order to do it, it would be very, very tough. It would be a very tough decision. And typically NBA front offices do not make that decision for a guy like this. They don't make that decision for a two-way guy who they like, right? I don't think this means that they didn't like Jeff. I do, however, think that if we could do it all over again, I think if the whole world could do this all over again, I'm pretty sure Jeff plays somewhere else. If he had known, the sense that I got was if he'd known that he was going to get 8 minutes in preseason, that he wasn't really going to have a shot. But I don't think the Raptors knew either. So I know that a lot of people are saying the Raptors did him dirty, and some people feel really bad for him. But here's the silver lining on that. If you listen to that interview and you get a real overview into the type of person he is and the people that are around him, from his dad to his sister to his mom to his trainer to his friends, I've gotten to get a really good picture of Jeff's life outside of basketball over the last 3-4 days. And my read on this is I've never been more confident that he will be fine. Right? On the one hand, you get a lot of insight into, the situation. You feel really bad because you feel like he tried really hard and he's a really good player and really good person, et cetera, et cetera. But on the other hand, you're also really happy because I'll tie it back to something that happened to me. My mom passed away. I became an orphan at the age of 20. Yeah, I've talked about this before. And I remember, something happening right around then with one of my cousins who was a lot older. And he, to this day, has both of his parents, touch wood. And I remember something happening, and we were involved in a situation that I don't feel comfortable talking about on a public podcast. And I remember thinking in that moment, this guy's 28 years old. He has both his parents. I am 20 years old. I am an orphan. This thing that is happening to him, I would deal with this 100 times more maturely than what he's doing right now. And it's in that moment that I realized that sometimes life gives you not what you deserve, but rather what you can handle. And I think that if you take the mental makeup of the player that he is and the people around him, if there's anyone who can absolutely thrive, use this as fuel, and absolutely just kick ass at his next stop, I think it'll be him. I don't think you've seen the last of Jeff Dowtin, in the NBA. Absolutely not. He will get another chance. Absolutely. The good news, somewhat good news, without going into names, some of you know, like I think two of you know, but hey man, what's up? I have never seen so many blue check marks checking out a story in my life. It was absolutely absurd. The number of people who are in the plug, in the league, in the inner circle of the fraternity of the NBA, from players to coaches, who saw that story on Instagram was ridiculous. Like, I was just, oh my God. So this did reach the intended audience. It may not get a ton of views because Jeff Dowtin is no longer a Raptor. This is a Raptors channel. People are just like, old news, move on. But I don't know if they watched the video, but I know they saw the story. Okay. There's some crazy people who saw the story. So does it make a difference? Maybe. Maybe. Because you know what? We live in a sensational world. And this ties into, something that we talked about in that video about being loud. We live in a world of TikTok. This is how our brains process information. Everything is either the best or the worst. LeBron James is either a complete choker or he's the GOAT, right? We live in a world that lacks nuance. Jeff is nuance in a nutshell. If nuance was a human being, it would be Jeff Dowtin. I personally feel really bad when people who live a stable, humble existence get screwed over because somebody else is just self-promoting and very loud and obnoxious and basically the opposite of Jeff Dowtin is Fred VanVleet. Even though they're both undrafted, even though they both could be considered late bloomers, undersized, etc., their personality types are almost exactly opposite. One person just wants to buy into team, one person just wants to buy new cars. Like, it's a completely flipped perspective. And I'm not saying one's right or wrong. I am, however, saying that the world that we live in is increasingly rewarding one type of player over another. So does it help that ex all-stars and current all-stars and superstars and coaches who are active in the NBA with nice blue check marks saw that story? I don't know. But I know for a minute they thought about Jeff Dowtin when they otherwise wouldn't have. And maybe it's a conversation, maybe it's a seed that we planted in someone's head where some point guard goes out with an injury or there's a roster spot open and someone saw that story and that conversation happens right now. Maybe it's happening right now. And they say, maybe we should look at Jeff Dowtin, this guy, Jeff Dowtin, this random guy thinks he's the most underrated player in the NBA, because that was the title of the video. He's the most underrated player in the NBA, is now a free agent. Am I doing that on purpose? You bet your fucking ass I am. Could I have chosen a far less sensational title? Yes, I could have. But I need people to understand how much I believe in this dude. And that is why I chose that title. Do I believe it to be true? Yeah. But, in a different world, I probably would have just said Brian Inge, interview with Jeff Dowtin or, on Jeff Dowtin, Toronto Raptors and whatever, but grab it. Get people, excited about it. It's not necessarily going to help the algorithm because, again, you're not talking about a superstar. You can go back and look at every channel's coverage of Jeff Dowtin over the last 3 years. It has consistently fewer views than almost any other player, other than maybe Malachi Flynn, right? If you're going to talk about Otto and these fringy guys, it doesn't get as much hype. You talk about Scottie, you're going to talk about Pascal, it'll get a lot of hype. So that's sort of how we're wired. So I think that is the good news, that somebody saw it. A lot of people saw it. Hopefully the right people, maybe of all those people, just one person had to click it and be like, you know what? This guy makes some really good points. I could really use this guy in my locker room. I cannot imagine that you could ever walk. We may not have done the greatest job of editing that video, opening intro aside. But I will tell you, if you listen to that interview for the full 50 minutes and you don't walk away with a completely profoundly different perspective of Jeff Dowtin than you had walking into it, you were not paying attention. It is a very compelling case. I think we've made a really good case for him. And I hope the right people watch it. And that is the close of the Jeff Dowtin positives. Negatives. There were a lot of people saying, this guy sucks. This guy's not a difference maker. So emotional, Rob. So sensitive. I had to actually block a longtime viewer of this channel who's going to find that he can no longer comment. Slamma Jamma, that's to you. 5 negative comments in a row on 5 different videos, you blocked. All snippy, all weird, all lies. No. Look, I grew up loving role players, and this is going to tie in perfectly to the part of the script where I talk about the way that we talk about the game. I grew up loving Eric Snow. At one point, genuinely, I was asked, who's your favorite player? And I said, Brian Grant. And you're saying, Brian Grant is your favorite player? Guy who averaged like 9 points per game is your favorite player? Loved watching Brian Grant. I don't know why. I love those Portland teams. I like Steve Smith. I liked Steve Smith a lot as a player. There's a lot of these guys, man. A lot of them. I like Chauncey Billups. I like Ben Wallace. I liked a lot of players who weren't necessarily considered superstars. And some of them were just considered straight up scrubs, but they were really good at their role. People often say that you can't win a championship without a superstar because no team has ever won a championship without a superstar. Even the one exception that is often cited, the Detroit Pistons 2004 championship, I would argue that Rasheed Wallace is a superstar who just never, ever got the numbers of a superstar. I tell you, like, I remember very clearly how talented this guy was. He had every bit the talent. Like, I remember there was a time Rasheed went up to a referee and said, who are the top 3 power forwards in the NBA? And the ref said, you, KG, and Tim Duncan. Like, he was right there. Right there. 2K had him rated like 91 at the peak. I think he was like a 93. If you just want my fair perspective on it, I think he was like a 93 to 95. He was so good. Defensively, offensively, he was great. Just never got the numbers for it. Sheed was one of my favorite players too. I just like guys like this because here's the thing. This is going to be hot take territory. I don't think anyone has, maybe someone has said this, but I haven't heard it. But I just want to say this because this has been the byproduct of a lot of the discussions that I've had over the last 3 days. Every single player in the NBA, with the exception of maybe 5 to 10, if put in a situation to do so, could average 20 points per game. Let me know in the comments if you think that that's crazy. I don't even know how to debate this, to be honest. Almost every single player. Okay. Oh my God. This comment. Sorry, I'm like, if I had coffee in my mouth, I probably would have spit it out. Okay, good luck on that one. Look, there are 50 guys in Europe, probably 100 guys in prison who could do the same. 20 points. It's not that hard. That is very much not what the media would like you to believe. Right? Talk to any person who is deeply embedded within the NBA. I'm talking scouts, head coaches, assistant coaches, players, like top players and veteran players, not maybe young players. They would almost all unanimously agree with that almost any player, if you desperately wanted them to, could average 20 points per game. You can rig an offense this way. If I want Nikola Vucevic to average 20 points per game, could do it. If I wanted Alex Caruso to average 20 points per game, he could do it. If I wanted DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, if I wanted Patrick Williams to be my 20 point per game, I just named you 5 potential 20 point per game scorers. If I wanted Kobe White to be a 20 point per game scorer, he could do it. Lonzo Ball, he could do it. Ayo Dosunmu, he could do it. Almost every single player in the Chicago Bulls could average 20 points per game. Could they all do it at the same time? Hell no. So how does a team determine who gets to be the guy who scores 20 points per game this season? Now, this is not something that you're going to hear on ESPN, and I don't think this is something that most people would even agree with, largely because it It's like telling people that Santa's not real, right? The casual fan watches the game and says, that's my 20-point per game scorer. He's better than my 10-point per game scorer, my 5-point per game scorer. There's a notion that the guy who's averaging 20 points is doing so because he is A, the one who can do it. Now, that loses its cachet if you find out that Svi Mykhailiuk could average 20 points per game in his sleep if you put the right offense around him and set screens for him and gave him the green light. Yes, Svi is a freaking amazing shooter, in theory at least. Utah, Ish Wainwright, Justin Champagny, Delano Banton. Yo, I'm just naming you 20-point per game scorers left and right. They could all do it if they had the green light, had the opportunity, had the right roster around them to do it. If you had, okay, put it this way. Malachi Flynn. This guy wants Malachi Flynn to be an all-star. I'm the coach of the Toronto Raptors, and someone says, if Malachi Flynn averages 25 points per game this year, you will get $1 billion. I guarantee you Malachi Flynn is averaging 25 points per game this year. Guaranteed. We will suck. We will lose probably every single game. Well, I don't know about every single game. We're really good defensively, so we probably wouldn't even lose every single game. We might even be competitive. We might even be competitive. We might even be like a fringy play-in team. We wouldn't be very efficient offensively because he's not that good, but he would get his 25. If I really wanted him to set high screens with Jakob, get him coming off like elevator screens with Scottie and OG, get him open looks all the time, he's going to shoot 32%, so teams are just going to dare him to shoot because why would you run off a 32% three-point shooter? Give him 10, 11 threes a game? Shit, man, this guy could average a lot of points. But why would you do that? That's not fun. Who the hell is Malachi Flynn? And that is the part of the game that we don't talk about, which is who the hell is that guy? The branding effort to sell this game, the game has to be sold. It doesn't work if it doesn't sell. This is the part of the basketball that I think drives basketball purists and old school coaches insane. Because every old school coach, like a Larry Brown, look at how the Pistons played. I think Larry Brown basically, it's so funny. I talked to someone once who said Larry was so frustrated, so freaking frustrated with the Allen Iverson debacle in Philadelphia that the next time he got to the finals, which was with the Detroit Pistons, he decided to make the antithesis, like the case against Allen Iverson. Now, I don't know if he'll ever admit that on record. I don't know if this is true, but it makes a lot of sense. The Pistons were considered the one team that won without a superstar. I've already told you that they had one, but he didn't have the numbers of a superstar, so people got to say that. The truth is, that's how a lot of coaches, if they didn't have to think about the business side of the league, contracts, fans, ticket sales, jersey sales, would actually opt to play egalitarian. But fans have been primed to want to see a guy score 35 points, 40 points. They've been primed to compare their guy versus the other guy. And that's not to say that Kobe Bryant isn't more skilled than Michael Finley or Eddie Jones. That's not to say that. But that is to say that the Lakers could have won with Kobe averaging 22, 23 as well as 28, 29. Probably. People talk about triple doubles like they're a thing, right? Do you remember there was a year where Michael Jordan almost averaged 10 assists per game? It was like 1 year early in his career where I think it was with Doug Collins and they ran him at point guard. So all of the talk about LeBron James is just like this way more well-rounded player than Michael Jordan because he gets more, like the GOAT debate, right? Completely throw this out of context. Two things. The argument against Michael is longevity, scandal, and that LeBron is a more well-rounded player playing in a more talented league. The argument for Michael and against LeBron is that Jordan played in a more competitive, in a tougher league with rules that were less favorable for scorers and slashers, played with more physicality, played with hand checking, and ultimately that he won more scoring titles, that he was more dominant scorer. In league history, almost every single time someone has won a scoring title, they have also been the leading shot attempt taker. So if LeBron James wanted to, he could have won 15 scoring titles in his career. Would that have cemented him as the GOAT? If Michael Jordan had the foresight to know that LeBron was coming forward and he really wanted to, could Michael Jordan have averaged 10 assists throughout his entire career? Hell yes. Could Michael Jordan was so good. Could he have averaged 10 assists plus win scoring titles? Yes, he could have. Would that have absolutely cemented the GOAT title? The GOAT debate. The determination of who should score and who shouldn't score, who should shoot from where, who should have what role, who should start. The end consideration should always be whatever gives us the best option to win. Michael Jordan scoring 35 points per game for you is better than splitting those touches between Tony Kukoc and Scottie Pippen. He was just that good. He was just that efficient. What drove me absolutely crazy about Fred VanVleet's entire season last year offensively as a scorer was that almost I could throw a dart. Like if I lined up 450 players, all 450 players, I would bet dollars to donuts that if I threw a dart at random at a player, I would be confident that player could score 20 points more efficiently than Fred VanVleet. Almost guaranteed. I would really pray that I would not end up with like some super inefficient, like hustle big. But it drove me crazy because it was such a lie. But this is not a lie that people talk about very often in the NBA circle because it completely screws up how they brand the game, which is a star-centric thing. Role players are super important. Why? How many McDonald's All-Americans, high school 5-star recruits, guys who led their team to a state championship refuse to be role players at the next level? No. Do you know why they refuse? How many of you grew up in the 90s like I did? I think if you grew up in the 90s, early 2000s, you saw the effect of Michael Jordan on the playground. You also saw the effect of and one basketball on the playground. You saw the effect of Skip to Malou, right? Guys, it's a copycat world. It's a copycat league, right? If all you promote is the 25 point per game scorer, if all you promote is Michael Jordan and you don't promote Luke Longley and you don't promote Horace Grant and you don't talk about Ron Harper, you don't talk about their contributions, you don't talk about what they're doing to influence winning, then all you're doing is teaching every single person, and every child out there is a narcissist by default. Like all children are preoccupied with only themselves, and everyone grows up in this world where they are all the hero. Like nobody watches Peter Pan, nobody listens to Peter Pan and thinks, oh, I'm Hook. I mean, someone might. They don't think I'm sailor number 2. But the truth is most of us in life are going to be sailor number 2. Right. And we don't have any buy-in to that. So you just walk around and this is like, it's such a weird thing because the basketball can be such a parallel to life. And there's so many parallels. And I think that in this case, this is the biggest one. It's everybody thinks they're a freaking star. And honestly, TikTok, Instagram, social media, it's just exacerbated this so much more. Oh my God, I'm going to get onto a political rant. I don't want to, but this is true. So every single player comes into the league thinking they're going to be a 20 point per game scorer because they did it at a previous level and their coach asks them to come off the bench and average 3-4 points per game and be a good teammate, and they break. Their entire ego breaks because it's not getting the hype, it's not getting the recognition, they're not being recognized on the street, so they have to start acting out. How many players have I seen fizzle out of the league because they did something stupid, like got a drug bust or, whatever, because they just weren't getting minutes? It's not an excuse. What I'm saying is we are not giving attention to the guy who sets picks because setting picks doesn't sell tickets. Scoring sells tickets. If you promote it, they will copy it. It's always the case. When I was a kid growing up, we would all try to go up for the layup, switch hands, even though we didn't have the vert, try to put it around like Michael Jordan. Okay. Tried to copy the moves of Allen Iverson, wear a headband like Allen Iverson, sleeve like Allen Iverson, AI shoes, and one crossover mixtape. New mixtape. What's Skip to My Lou doing? What's this dude doing? And you're just copying it, you're copying it. Because that's what's on Sports Center, that's what's on your computer, and that's the example you have, and you're like, all right, if I want what this guy has, I have to do what this guy's doing. And now, if you're on a playground, it's dudes launching from like 4 feet, 5 feet behind the line, screaming, Steph. Everyone can't be Steph. It doesn't matter. I remember one time watching Damon Stoudemire launching 3-pointers from half court, and he hit like 17 in a row. I remember Andrea Bargnani doing the same thing. These guys are so freaking talented. It is ridiculous. But at the NBA level, everyone walks in thinking that they're going to be a 20-point per game all-star, because nobody, I don't think most people, woke up and said, I'm going to be the next Dale Davis. I'm going to be the next Brian Grant. I'm going to be the next, Sean Elliott. I mean, Sean Elliott was a hell of a player, but like, I'm going to be the next Luke Longley. Most people don't wake up saying that. Most people say, I want to be the next Michael Jordan. I want to be the next Shaq. I want to be the next Giannis. I want to be the next Jokic. And they pattern their games after those guys. And that's where they fall apart. So they got to come into the league. And if they were doing all that stuff in high school, chances are they're not getting drafted. They're doing it in college. Everyone's got to be a scorer in college, right? You got to be 25-point per game, 22-point per game guy, not at a mid-major. Come out, before your 4th year, because God forbid you should turn 22 and, your hair turns gray. We are definitively fucking up somehow as a basketball society in terms of the things that we promote and the things that we overlook. Now, to close this off, everything that I'm saying right now is exactly why I love Jeff Dowtin. Okay? Surprise, I'm not done talking about Jeff Dowtin. This entire movement, everything that I've been talking about on this channel, honestly, some people should be very embarrassed about the shit that they said last year. And you know who you are, content creators. Go back and listen to the shit that you were saying last year, this time, about Siakam, bro. I watched that video, Pascal Siakam, fake superstar. That video has 600 comments. I read them with popcorn. The shit that people were saying and how wrong they are right now, it's ridiculous. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm just saying, like, go back and read your shit. Why did I go on that sidebar? I don't know. I just needed to boast about that, I guess. A little self-promotion for Rob. It is imperative that we talk about the contributions of guys like Thaddeus Young and guys like Otto Porter and guys like Jeff Dowtin and guys like even Kem Birch when he was here. It is imperative. Even though they are not selling tickets, it is important to give them their due. Why? It is important for kids to watch them. Why? Because these are the players ultimately that lead to championships. Guys who are very good buying into roles that are less than. Mike Miller, Ray Allen were role players for the Miami Heat. They were both all-star level talents. Ray Allen's a Hall of Famer. Mike Miller was a former Rookie of the Year. These guys, both top 5 picks. They were role players. Shane Battier, top 6 pick, could have been a scorer, could have been a lot of things, opted to be a role player. There are a lot of guys. Patrick Beverley, I think he averaged 37 points per game in high school, or 30 points per game in high. He was a baller, bro. That's not his role. Anyone can score 20 points per game. Any pro hooper, there's guys in, I don't want to say Asia, but like maybe a couple guys in Asia as well. There's Dwight Howard, he was in Asia for a bit. There's a couple guys in Asia, a ton of guys in Europe, and a lot of guys in prison who could average 20 points per game in the NBA if you made yourself hell-bent on getting them 20 points per game. However, buying into a role happily and being a star in your role, not to preach to the choir here, but like this thing that Otto has done as a top 3 pick, former, top recruit, former, starter, made huge money, but now has just settled. What Vince did later in his career, what Jeff has done, despite being a very, very good high school player, college player, etc., starter, just settling into this. We as a society see this as the loser. They are the butt of the joke. They are the who cares if that guy gets waived. They are the, if they are very well paid, they are the albatross contract at the end of the bench. We have to change our thinking on this. Okay? Because last I checked, basketball is a team sport. It's not an individual sport. And yes, sometimes 8 guys play. You know that last year I firmly stood against any notion of the Raptors don't have a bench. I said that there was talent on the bench, that I felt bad for guys like Malachi, get bad for guys like Jeff Dowtin, bad for guys like Delano Banton, who had to constantly hear the Raptors don't have a backup point guard, the Raptors don't have a backup point guard, etc. The Raptors didn't have a backup point guard because someone made up their mind that someone was going to average 20 points per game and get a max contract. Okay, that's why the Raptors didn't have a backup, because I think you'll see very quickly that they did. And they had a couple, and they could have played them. If they'd given them any sort of rhythm and consistency, they probably could have played them and gotten away just fine. And maybe Fred VanVleet doesn't break down again. If all you do is talk about Scottie and Pascal and maybe OG, if you don't talk about Jakob's pick setting, and Jakob was fully capable of averaging 20 points per game. In his sleep, he could average 20 points per game. That's not his role. If you don't talk about Dennis Schroder making a sacrifice, playing more off the ball, if you don't talk about Gary making a sacrifice coming off the bench, if you don't promote this, if you don't talk about it in a favorable light, if you don't celebrate it, if you don't talk about Malachi Flynn, being a star in his role, being a spark plug, if you don't talk about Garrett Temple, everyone says waive Garrett Temple. No, chill. He's a part of the team. He's contributing something. These are the things that don't show up in the box score. These are things that don't show up in the analytics. These are the soft skills. These are the leadership qualities. You need buy-in. Otherwise, you have disruptive chemistry. That's what you didn't have last year. Every single player that you call a scrub could average 20 points per game. Almost all of them. So don't call them scrubs. Instead, celebrate them, because they are doing something that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other players did not mature fast enough to do. Because the truth is that there are a lot of guys out there who come into the league, and because some high lottery team drafted them and they have to justify the draft pick to their fan base to sell them on buying more tickets, because this is a business, they will be given ample opportunities. A guy like Adam Morrison, top 3 pick, given ample opportunities to start, despite the fact that he was absolutely horrible, right? Rafael Araujo, starter. Was he the 80th best center in the world at that point? No. But they drafted him with a lottery pick, so he had to start. You had to start him. He's 24 years old. You can't say he's a project at 24 years old from Brigham Young University. No, he had to start. He was awful. Not disrespecting Rafael Araujo. He was awful for an 8th overall pick. He was awful because he was picked after Andre Iguodala. Andre Iguodala is a great example. A star player who always moved towards role player. What, people completely miss about the Warriors dynasty is that it took guys like Andre Iguodala. Check where Andre was picked. He was the 9th overall pick, and he was one of the best rookies in his class. Sean Livingston, a 5th overall pick. You took those 2 guys, those super talented guys who bought into being bench players or being, 5th option, and starred in that role. They never complained about it. They did great in it. They played two-way. Those are the players that win you a championship. So, in closing, the Free Jeff Dowtin movement was actually an extension of everything that we've done all year, last year, which is an agenda against this let's say, toxic culture of basketball where the individual is put over the team. I understand that marketing exists. I understand that it is important that you have to brand your star. But at the end of the day, this is a sport. It is a business of sports. And maybe there are people out there who say, well, this is why I like college basketball. Well, don't get me started on the business of college basketball either. And maybe there's people out there who say, well, this is why I like prison yard basketball. Yeah, maybe that's a little bit closer. But when the pro league is setting the tone for how the college league and the prison yard league and the school league and the grade school league and the high school league and AAU is being played, when the marching orders are coming from the top down, then the whole well becomes infected, and the game that I grew up loving becomes tainted. So I find it very important that when I see examples of players who play a beautiful game, players like Nikola Jokic, players like Scottie Barnes, players like Jeff Dowtin, players like OG Anunoby, go look at every single player we've ever talked well about and find the common thread in all of them. Team first, they buy into the role. Scottie was a 5-star recruit, 4th overall pick. He did not have to play 5th option in his rookie year. He could have sulked about it. He could have been less efficient about it. He could have bitched and complained about it. He never did. He never did. He said, whatever you need to win. That's it. And he won rookie of the year. He never pressed once. Do you know how much Cade and Jalen Green pressed to win rookie of the year? Do you know how much they campaigned for it? Do you know how many times I saw them take a stupid shot towards the end of the year trying to pad their stat totals? Scottie never did it. Never once. And if I didn't love him enough already at that point, that cemented it for me forever and ever. That this is who this guy is. Last year, same thing. If what you asked him to do, which was set picks for Fred VanVleet and roll to the basket, if it was resulting in winning, he wouldn't have given a shit, I don't think. But it wasn't resulting in winning. And I think that's why he eventually rebelled. Doing what is necessary to help your team win. Right now, he is the team's best option at a ton of positions. Okay. So now what is necessary for him is to become a 22 point per game scorer. It's what he's being asked to do by his coaching staff. Darko Rajakovic is telling him, I need you to run more high pick and roll. I need you to attack the basket. I need you to do this. Well, that's not necessarily, we can hear all day that Nick Nurse is telling him that, but I don't think that's what Nick Nurse was really preaching with that offensive philosophy. We want Scottie to be more aggressive. It's one thing to say that. It's another thing to set up everything around that actually happening. And I think that's what's really happening right now is for the first time, Scottie Barnes is on it for the first time since EYBL with the Sharks. Scottie Barnes is on a team that is actually his team to some extent. He's on a team where he is going to be allowed to be the author of the offense. I'm excited. If this Free Jeff Dowtin movement has done anything, and I know, by the way, just on the record, off the record, whatever, I'll say it, a lot of players have heard about this Free Jeff Dowtin movement. It's actually pretty funny how many of them have. I think it's great. I wish this was a bigger platform because it could influence something so great, right? It really could. Because it could give hope to every young player who's asked to take an end of the bench role. And they have this decision. Do I become completely irrelevant and invisible to the fan base? Or do I rebel and get myself kicked off the team and kicked out of the league and, playing in some other country in a year? Because my ego can't take it. Well, there's the third door now, which is there is a fan out there who's going to appreciate the way I cheer for my team. There's a fan out there who's going to appreciate my readiness. There's a fan out there who's going to appreciate my preparedness when I get into the game. There's a fan out there who's going to, champion an entire movement around how I clap for my teammates and my analytics and my defense and my screen setting and my 2-point performances and my 3-point performances because they are impacting winning and I'm playing the right way. How many players out there who stuck to their ego of I'm a star, I'm a former all-star, I'm a former MVP? How many of those players, if they had just gotten a little bit humble about the game of basketball, could have been great 6 men for a couple of years? And Allen Iverson an ideal six man for like 4 or 5 years towards the end of his career. He's a great passer, great slasher, great creator. Much better than, some people remember him, much worse than some people remember him, but he didn't want to. Russell Westbrook doesn't want to. These guys don't want to because their entire modus operandi, their whole lives, has been chasing the bag, chasing status, chasing trophies. I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm just saying their priorities are screwed up. And if you don't want, in my lifetime, I'm 35 years old, going on 36 in a month. In my lifetime, every 10 years that I take a scan of this game that I love, and I've loved since I was 4 years old, it has gotten worse. The self-promotion has gotten worse. The blindness towards team over individual has gotten worse. The play style and the departure from fundamental basketball has gotten worse. You can consider shooting fundamental, but I also consider reading the game and being a student of the game and studying film and generally knowing how to move without the basketball, not just standing around pounding the ball and taking, 40-foot jump shots. That's skill work. It's not necessarily fundamentals. I've seen it get worse every 10 years, and I don't know what, when we're going to have a kid or whatever, if we have a kid. I don't want my kid to grow up in a world where basketball is just shit. And so I would love for my kid to have an example on the team of a player like a Scottie or a player like a Jeff Dowtin or a player like OG, where I can actually point to that player and say, that's basketball. What the rest of these motherfuckers are doing, I don't know what that is, but this is basketball. It's a team sport, team first. 20 points, 10 points, 2 points, irrelevant. Win, loss. Only two things that count. Anyways, that was a pretty epic rant. All right. I am going to sleep. I haven't slept in 20 plus hours. I must tell you, I took a very long emotional roller coaster with this Jeff thing. I got very, very too invested in it. Probably too invested in it. But I learned a lot. Learned a lot about myself, learned a lot about Jeff, learned a lot about the NBA, got to meet a lot of really cool people. It was cool. I'm excited about the Raptors season. It's just around the corner now. I think it's the 22nd today. Is it 22nd? It is, tell me it's the 23rd. These days are crawling. It is the 22nd today. And the Raptors play on the 25th. Sunday, Raptors play on Wednesday. I am probably not going to do a live. I wanted to do a live with Leo to do an Eastern and Western Conference breakdown, but Leo is unwell right now, so wishing him a speedy recovery. I prefer to do this Western Conference and Eastern Conference shows with somebody that can, ideally someone who covers a Western Conference team. I may end up doing it one by myself. I don't know. But we will see. Anyways, this has been an interesting live. I hope it was interesting for you as well. I apologize that my delivery was a little bit slow. They say being sleepy is a little bit like being drunk. So I'm basically doing a live drunk. I haven't slept in like 20 plus hours, but I am going to go to bed now for a couple hours and then get up and do some editing. And then, yeah. So hopefully there will be like one more live between now and the game, but I will look forward to seeing you guys after the game. I really hope the Raptors whoop ass and come out strong, because the way that this fan base has been overreacting to every small thing right now, like from Gradey is like an all-star to Gradey is the worst, we should have picked Cam, like my God, like this fluctuation is happening every game, like chill, pick a side and just stick with it. I hope the Raptors come out strong. As I said, or at least tried to say earlier, sometimes when you have a new system, new coach, you can catch a lot of teams sleeping early on. You don't usually have an accurate gauge on a new system until you're about, I want to say 3-4 months in. So whether the Raptors start 4-0 or 0-4, I don't care. I am more concerned in how they are playing. I am way more concerned in whether or not there continues to be buy-in. And maybe, starting off slow is not the worst thing in the world. Failure exposes a lot of things as well. You know, you start out 5-0, you don't know who anybody is. When you start out 0-5, you start to find out who guys are real quick. So in either case, I promise that I'm not going off the deep end. I'm not judging shit for like the first 15 to 20 games. I need to see 15 to 20 games before I'm making any discernment on anything. And I'm talking Pascal's washed, Scottie's a superstar, Gradey's a bust, any of that shit. First of all, I'm not going to say any of that at all throughout the year. You can maybe pass. Scottie's a superstar might come out of my mouth at some point this year, but for the most part, I will be balanced. I do want to close this off by saying something. I watched my lives. I watched a couple of lives and 10 videos from last year around this time. Today, as I mentioned earlier in this video, I do like to do a reflective study to see if I've gotten better, gotten worse, whatever. I think I've gotten a lot calmer. When I was watching myself like a year ago, I kind of felt like this guy's a douche. I don't know if you guys felt that way. I don't know why you subscribed if you do, but I felt like this guy's very uncomfortable and he's being a bit of a prick about it. And he's very much a know-it-all. And the truth is that, yes, I do think that I know a lot about basketball. Yes, I do. However, at the time, I didn't know a lot about podcasting. So I think I was overcompensating. And I think I was being a bit of a dick to just kind of sound like more of an authority. I don't know if that's coming across. I think I defended myself very, very harshly. Having now spoken to even more people than I could have ever imagined over the last year and a half, like we're talking trainers, scouts, all these people that apparently don't exist, but having talked to them and having their notes and having their support and having conversations where I'm being treated as an equal to someone who's worked in the league office for 20 years and they're having an equivalent conversation with me has quelled, or is quelled a word, has completely nullified any of the insecurity of small dog insecurities in me, if that makes sense. I no longer care if you think that my take is ridiculous. It doesn't bother me at all. So what I'm trying to say is that last year when I was watching some of the videos from last year, I came off as a bit of a douche to myself. Like I was literally watching it and I'm like, I don't think I could listen to this guy for 10 minutes. I don't know like why this has 14,000 views. I don't even like this person very much. They're right about a few things that they're saying here, but they don't have to be so arrogant about it and they don't have to be so smug about it. So if I had to give myself a grade for the last year, I think I would give myself compassionately like a C+ or a B-. I don't think I've even touched the surface of the consistency, quality, or whatever that I want to hit. But also something that I've really, really learned from the past year of just talking to people that I respect a lot is none of them had that quality. They were all super humble. Well, not all, but like mostly super humble. They were all trying to learn, even from me. And I'm just like, who the hell am I to teach you anything about anything? And they're trying to like ask me questions about it. And I'm like, man, they're giving me so much respect in this case. And they're offering so much humility and you can almost see why they are where they are. And I was just like, this is a great example to set by. So, you know, having less of that sort of arrogant know-it-all attitude towards this entire thing and taking more of a beginner's mindset and just saying, okay, there's a lot of stuff that I don't know about basketball. You could write an encyclopedia times 30 with all the shit that I don't know, have known at some point and forgotten. There's so far to go. And quite frankly, even if you were to take the smartest person in the entire world in basketball, whoever that person is for you, be it, you know, some podcaster, be it Thinking Basketball, Ben Taylor, whoever it is for you, that basketball guru, the czar, the guy who knows everything, the guy who's the analytics, whatever, even that person has barely scratched the surface of what is possible to know about the game of basketball. So we all have a lot to go, a long way to go. I don't, you know, it's funny, as much as I judge myself, like for being that arrogant prick a year ago and being very snippy in the comment section and being smug and going back and forth with people in the lives and allowing very casual takes just bother me and get all emotionally rattled. I got to tell you, as much as that bothers me, watching myself, it also bothers me watching certain content creators today. Like there are certain Raptors people that do have that sort of smugness and attitude where I'm just like, who the fuck are you? You know, like you're talking half nonsense. Like who are you to talk this way? You know, you're talking to your audience who presumably knows less than you, which is why they're tuning in, or knows as much as you, or believes some of the core beliefs that you have. But what is the need for all this smugness? Like I could literally, you know, throw a dart out a window and find someone who knows more about basketball than you do. Why are you talking this way? And I think that, you know, just again, when you talk to some of these people who are very much settled in their basketball world life, you get a sense that it's one hand washing the other, right? Like they are where they are because they have this approach. Like they're very humble. Like I'm pretty sure if you talk to Bobby Webster for 10 minutes, you wouldn't get a sense of like arrogant prick who knows everything about basketball kind of thing. You know, there's almost like a curiosity to him that you know, and you can get that from scouts and trainers as well. Like they're confident, they know what they're talking about, but there isn't that unlikable quality. So anyways, so B minus, C plus for sure. Need to be a lot better for sure. Gonna learn a lot more this year. Can't wait. And looking forward to a great season. And hopefully this time next year, I'm not giving myself a D, you know. But yeah, and yeah, I would like to get back to some higher content, or higher quality content. There's a lot of things coming up for me personally, from my feature film, going to film festivals. Maybe there's gonna be like a 3-day, 4-day, 5-day period where I have to do some live from Paris, or a live from somewhere across the world. That would be super cool because I would actually get to meet some of our international followers. So that would be really cool too. Then there's going to be Pendants in February, but then I'm clear. After February, I'm good. Anyways, the sun is coming up now and it's bright on my face and my lighting has changed completely, but I want to wish you all a very happy Sunday. I really hope that Jeff gets signed somewhere, man. I can't tell you like how many times I've talked to people who don't even follow basketball and they're just like, who is this Jeff person? Are they a relative of yours? Are they a friend of yours? I'm like, nope, never talked to him, never met him, but really want this guy to catch on with a team. So I hope he gets a really great opportunity somewhere. I know he's going to kill it. And if you have not watched the Jeff Dowtin interview not the Jeff Dowtin interview, but the Brian Inge interview about Jeff Dowtin, it goes into Kevin Durant, goes into DMV hoops. It's a really cool conversation. Brian is a super cool person, and it was a vibe, man. Like, I mean, the conversation continued after we stopped rolling. It was continuing before we started rolling. Like, it was great. It was a great conversation. I appreciate, you know, him showing me any time at all. Like, he's so accomplished in the world of basketball. Shocking, really, how accomplished and how connected and how basketball is his life. Like his whole life is basketball. His life is the connections and the business of basketball, the art of basketball, like everything. So it's like really, you know, there are these people in the world that you don't hear about all the time. Like you hear about the Tim Grovers, you may not hear about the Brian Makins and the Brian Inges, but like they are super connected in the world of basketball. They play Division I basketball, they play high school basketball. The basketball was their whole life growing up. Like they're all just, you know, like darts that just missed the NBA kind of thing. And they've found a way to be a part of the NBA in a different way that doesn't necessarily make ESPN Sports Center, but like they're still connected to everybody. They know every single player in the league or half the players in the league. They're still, you know, it's their godfather. It's crazy like how it was just a great conversation, and I suggest you check it out. And I think you get a little bit of insight into the player and the person Jeff is. I think you get an insight into the business of the league, what it's like to be an undrafted player, and also, you know, if you were a fan of Kevin Durant coming up in high school like I was, I think you get a couple of cool little stories about the Hill as well. Agreed. There is a respectful bluntness and a snobby one. Now it's respectful. Last year it wasn't. Thanks. Yeah, I agree. Respect the Ripper. Sometimes bluntness is needed because people get stuck in their own mindsets. I don't know how not to be blunt. I think that might be part of the Asperger's. That just might be part of who I am. I've always told people how I think straight. But from my perspective, being honest varies greatly when you're not settled. If you're an unhappy person and you're honest, yeah, you're being honest, but you're probably pissing off a lot of people and probably being a dick about it, right? There's absolutely a way to convey your opinion without getting super defensive and angry at everybody. And I haven't really been the greatest at that throughout the year. So, yeah. To be honest, we had a lot of hard-headed fans last year, so the bluntness was needed to break through the concrete heads. Hindsight is 2020. It's not entirely. I'm not entirely sure that I mean, I'm not. Wow, the lighting has completely changed. Now I am just like. I'm not entirely sure that that's true. I do believe that we participated in the influencing of change. I do think there was a way to do it without alienating so many people, though. And I don't care about the subscribers that were lost or anything like that or whatever. It was just energy draining for me and probably energy draining for a lot of people. And at the end of the day, if your goal is to change someone's mind about something or to open their eyes to something, it really does help if they don't hate your guts by the end of that, right? Like I just went through this with the film that I was on, right? Like the guy that I was working with, like I wanted him to learn to be more of a professional, like filmmaker. You know what I mean? Like do things more pro. And I went about it in this very blunt way where I just basically told him it was the most unprofessional thing I'd ever seen and et cetera. And then when you put that kind of attitude towards it, instead of like they don't even feel cared for, they don't feel they're having constructive criticism, they more or less just feel attacked. And when people feel attacked, I don't think you get to judge them for retaliating or hating you or anything like that. I think it's just a defense mechanism. Like when you start really prodding at people's insecurities and their ego, like I mean, nobody's trying, right? Nobody's trying to be bad. I think there was a film that we programmed at Penn Dance. If you ever catch it online or something, definitely go check it out. It's called Quest, and it's by this director Santiago Rizzo, and it's based on the 10 rules that his ex-teacher taught him to get him out of life on the streets. And Santi was like, you know, he was a kid who got into a lot of trouble. The film has what's his name? The guy from Get Out. The guy who got really big after Get Out. Not the main guy. Oh my God, how am I forgetting his name? I love him. I'm forgetting his name right now. Anyways, I'm very tired. One of Tim's rules, like his mentor, his teacher's rules, was assume positive intent. So even the fan who is trolling you in the comments for whatever reason they're doing that, they are doing it with some sort of intention that they believe to be valid, positive, honest from their side. I don't think people are trying to go out of their way to hurt people. I'm just assuming that that's true. So typically assuming positive intent never really hurts you. Obviously having boundaries, being honest, these are really important. Bluntness was needed. Last year was delusional. I honestly think you could have reached more people. Like you could still be blunt. Like you can still say Pascal Siakam is, you know, not a top 10 player. I think there's a nicer way to do it though. I think there's a funny way to do it. I refuse to believe that what I did was the absolute optimal way to do it. I stand behind it for sure. I did the best. Assume positive intent. Also assume positive intent for your past self. You know, forgive yourself very easily. I just think like, yes, there were some hard truths that needed to be broken through to this fan base. Yes, I am very happy that we are no longer having a debate about whether Pascal Siakam is a top 5 player. I'm glad that we're not having a debate about whether Scottie's a bust right now, but God damn it. Like give it 2 weeks. Give Scottie 2 weeks to come out and average 10 points per game. People will be on that train again. Give Gradey like, you know, an 0 for 7 start from the year on shooting. And then people will be like, oh my God, we should pick Cam Whitmore. So it's like, it's going to be that way sometimes, you know, with sports. And I'd like to tell you it's just Raptor fans, but it's not. Like I've listened to Leaf fans, Jays fans. It's sports in general. It's shit. People talk about politics this way too. The arena of sports has gone into politics. I feel like, you know, the sports I grew up with, you know, modern NBA reminds me of most of the sports that I followed when I was younger. WWF, WWE. There's good guys, there's bad guys, there's a heel turn, there's like this guy's a good guy now, but then he changed teams, now he's a bad guy. Y'all remember Hulk Hogan joining NWO? Same shit. It's like, oh, like how has anyone drawn, I mean, I'm sure someone has. There's a lot of smart people in this world. The parallels to the Outsiders, Hogan turning on WCW and joining Hall and Nash. Has anyone drawn a parallel from that to LeBron joining Miami? Did they draw the parallel? Because they did almost the exact same thing. Not one, not two, not three, not four. Anyways, this is just rambling on and on and on. At this point, I'm like, am I too sleepy to sleep? Am I like, do you just miss it at some point? Like the sun is up now. How am I supposed to go to sleep now? Anyways, should I just delete this live? Like this is like the most rambly live in the history of the world. Maybe it's good. Maybe I've actually touched on something. Maybe this is like the best live I've ever done. I have no idea. I am not in any perspective to judge right now, but it has been honest, and I'm looking forward to the Raptor season. Have a good one, guys. Take care. Peace. And hit subscribe and definitely watch that Jeff, the video with Brian Inch. Peace.